Drinking blood is one of the healthiest things that you can do.
Today's guest is a millionaire entrepreneur that eats the way our ancestors did.
So I kind of pull its leg up, I cut off this big guy's testicles.
You what? He has a diet that consists of only raw meat. He regularly washes his hair with eggs and drinks milk straight from the source. What's the weirdest thing you put on your face?
Definitely semen.
This unique lifestyle has garnered him an impressive online presence as well as a lucrative business model where he mentors students interested in his unconventional methods of staying healthy. Oscarvore, welcome to the Jack Neel Podcast.
Thank you for having me on. That was a wonderful introduction.
Thank you, brother. Yeah, so we're currently in Helsinki, Finland for a business conference, and Oscar and I just met a few days ago, and I am fascinated by his story. A mentor of mine actually cured his chronic illness with an all-meat diet, basically saving his life. And I've heard stories of many who have cured incurable physical and mental disorders. So yeah, this topic is super interesting to me. I think a lot of people are fascinated by people with unconventional diets. So yeah, I think a good place to start here, Oscar, is it's pretty strange. You wash your hair with eggs.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that I've been doing for almost 4 years.
4 years?
And it's funny because if you speak to some people, let's say in Eastern Europe, and when I'm on dating a girl and I mention it, usually not on the first date, she'll say, oh, my grandma used to do that. Oh, my grandparents used to do that.
In Eastern Europe?
Yeah, just the Ukrainian girls that I've dated, things like that. They've mentioned that the people that they know used to do it. So this is something, and it's kind of the theme with a lot of what I do. It's just humans have been doing these things for thousands of years, or even millions if you believe in evolution. So it's not necessarily new. It's just we've seemed to have forgotten it. It's kind of been lost, let's say. And so yeah, it's just kind of going back to how people were doing things once upon a time. And yeah, the egg hair is something that anyone can do. It's very easy. You just put an egg in your hair for 20 minutes and you wash it out with cold water. Otherwise, if it's hot water, it will cook. And you're left with silky smooth hair. I did it this morning.
You did it this morning?
Yeah.
So just one egg. And why is that good for your hair?
Well, because the egg has a lot of nutrients in it, but it's also, it doesn't have any chemicals, right? Because shampoo has no nutrients plus chemicals. So the egg is lots of nutrients and no chemicals.
Does it actually clean your hair? And
it emulsifies the grease from the hair. So your hair is, silky smooth. And yeah, you're left with very nice hair. Now I've seen
I need to give that a try.
Yeah, for sure. And it's something that if someone has hair loss, for example, it's one of the things that would be like the staple things for someone to do.
It actually helps with hair loss.
It would help to stop your hair falling out quite quickly. It can even thicken hair over a few months of doing it.
That's really interesting. Are there any other benefits to washing your hair with eggs?
Well, it's mostly just about avoiding chemicals, having the nutrients in your hair from the egg itself. Like the egg yolk contains all the nutrients that you need. And that absorbs into the scalp by leaving it on the skin for 20 minutes or so. So then you're also strengthening the hair follicles, which is the thing that would stop hair falling out.
That's interesting. So you don't use any like regular shampoo or conditioner?
No, I haven't used those for like 4 years.
So when you do it with eggs, you just do eggs every few days or so? Or how often?
I do it now I do it twice a week. Sometimes I went through a phase of 3 months without washing my hair at all, even maybe 4 months of no shampoo, no eggs, nothing. And you can read about this online. When people do that, they basically, your body will start to create a lot of grease, excess grease, as it starts to like remove all the chemicals that have accumulated there. Because everyone, we've all been using shampoos and creams and whatever for, potentially decades. And then, so I went through that period of like nothing for 4 months, and my hair was getting super greasy. But in a way, I just saw it as like a kind of detox, you could say. Yeah. And I just let it happen. It was during Corona anyway, so I was just like, I'm not going to see anyone anytime soon. So yeah, I let that go. But other than that, yeah, I haven't used any. I've been using it consistently.
So what would you recommend to people like if you're going to do no poo, like no shampoo, no conditioner?
That's what it's called.
Like, should you use the eggs to supplement that, or do you think it's fine without using eggs?
Well, you can. Some people might argue that there's actually benefits to your body creating all the oils that it has. So in a way, you want to leave it. You could leave it. That would be like one option. If you think about dogs and cats or any wild animal, they're not using anything, right? And they kind of have some kind of naturally greasy hair. So you could leave it like that if you want to see how that goes, and maybe you believe that it could be beneficial for you to let the oils run their course at least for a while, because most people never do that in their entire lives, actually. But other than that, yeah, I think using the eggs.
Does your hair look better now? Like, have you noticed like more texture?
Definitely, much thicker. Used to have hair loss. My hair was actually shedding for quite a while.
It's really interesting. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of guys that want like I mean, I get DMs and comments all the time, like, how do you do your hair, bro? Like, how do you do it?
Yeah.
Like, I've done it artificially and just like with different products and stuff, and like different devices. But like, I know a lot of people will actually like get wavy or curly hair that have straight hair just by like not using shampoo and conditioner as much, or like doing something like that.
Yeah, so then maybe...
Have you found that for like your students or like you or anything?
I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say, maybe more wavy, things like that, but not more straight, definitely. So more wavy, I guess, would be how it would usually go.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So tell me about eggs in general. I feel like we're stuck on this topic, but it's interesting.
Interesting.
Like, do you eat a lot of eggs?
So, I mean, it changes a lot. So on my Instagram, you see maybe videos where I'm eating, a tray of eggs whilst doing something funny. Obviously that's good content. And people always ask, well, how many eggs do you really eat? I'd say it can vary a lot. So it always depends everything else that you have access to. For example, there might be some times where I've just been essentially fasting on eggs for even days. And that's actually a very good way to lose a lot of fat very quickly, is just to do an egg fast, because it's very low calorie, very satiating.
And these are raw eggs?
Yeah, raw eggs only. Yeah, definitely. Other times, I might just have 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. It also depends on the quality of the eggs, very important. Because if you only have low quality eggs, then I wouldn't necessarily recommend eating loads of those, because they're not actually necessarily going to make your health any better. But sometimes, for example, when I'm in the US, you have in the US, everyone thinks the food in the US is the worst in the world.
Yeah.
And generally it is. But you also have the best. You kind of have the polar opposites there. You also have the best food in the world, which is the Amish food in Pennsylvania. So you have these Amish people that farm very naturally. They don't use any chemicals, any soaps, any disinfectants. They only feed the chickens, for example, natural foods, and the FDA completely hates them for that and is always trying to shut them down. But they have actually the best food in the world, at least that you can buy online and get delivered to your door. So
you can buy food from the Amish?
Amish, only a few farms, but they sell food and they deliver it to your house. And so when you have these eggs, these are essentially the best eggs that money can buy. In that case, I might eat like 30 eggs. The way I would see it is, let's say I went to Miami for a week or something, then I would basically I would even be willing to kind of gain a lot of weight in that week, because I want to, almost like a penguin, I would want to restore any nutritional deficiencies with this amazing Amish food. So if, let's say I go to Miami, I'm going to order a huge Amish delivery. I might eat 60 eggs, 30 eggs a day in that week.
30 eggs a day.
Yeah, like literally I've done that many times.
It's like Rocky Balboa style.
Exactly, yeah. And I might gain a little bit of weight, but I'm going to feel very good, and I know it's kind of like, it's going to replenish any deficiencies, and that's going to last a good while. Just like a penguin hibernating in the winter.
Yeah.
So the eggs can vary, basically. Depends on the quality, what else you're eating. And yeah, those would be the 2 main factors.
I want to talk a bit about your background, but before we get into that, so why do you only eat raw meat?
It's an interesting question, and it's definitely not about taste, because raw meat, for the most part, does not taste better than cooked meat.
Yeah.
So it's not about taste, and usually that might be one of the main things that stops people doing it consistently. So for me, it's more, there's several things. One is like the physiological benefits of it. So when you start to eat raw meat, you'll notice that raw is actually much easier to digest than cooked meat. And it feels much lighter in your digestion, which can also then give you more energy, because the raw meat actually digests itself. It doesn't require digestive work from the body.
Digest itself?
Yeah, so there was an experiment done in 1984 by a Russian scientist who was committed to understanding the digestive system. And he basically took 2 dead frogs, and one of these frogs was actually boiled. So it's like a dead frog and a dead frog, but one was boiled. So it was essentially a cooked frog versus a raw frog. So he placed both of these frogs in hydrochloric acid, which mimics like the acidic environment of a carnivore's digestion.
Yeah.
And the cooked frog, after let's say 20 minutes, it was almost completely unchanged, completely the same as it was before it went in the hydrochloric acid. So it's almost like a piece of leather that doesn't digest so well.
Really?
And then you take the raw frog, and in 20 minutes, it's completely dissolved. And so concretely, that's kind of what you feel when you eat raw meat versus cooked.
Are there less calories in raw meat?
No, there's no less calories in it.
So it's the same amount of calories, but it digests faster.
Well, it's because it has all of the enzymes and the bacteria which actually digest for you. So it's like if you again took 2 dead frogs and you cooked one, and or even like a steak, something that maybe people can relate to more. You take like a roasted beef, like well roasted, gray when it's been well roasted, versus like a raw fresh beef, and you chuck both of them in the forest, and you come back in 2 or 3 days, the raw beef is going to be gone completely. It's going to self-digest. Flies are going to lay eggs on it. It's going to be gone. It's going to be eaten by maggots. The cooked beef will still be there for several weeks, completely unchanged. So you kind of have that same process happening in the body where the raw meat, concretely, and you can feel it, digests way better than eating raw meat.
So our ancestors, people started cooking meat for the taste.
Well, I mean, there's many reasons why they might start cooking, right? There's different theories. One could be, it's definitely taste, and it's very addicting. Eating brownies, pizza, whatever, those things taste so much dopamine when you eat that, versus eating a cooked steak, a raw steak has little to no dopamine. That's even one of the benefits. It's kind of like a low dopamine diet. So it's kind of the same reason people might take a break from going on social media, because it kind of resets the dopamine in their
Detox.
brain. Right, so it's in that sense, it has that benefit to it. But I think people started cooking, well, one, because they were probably cooking other stuff. Let's say, if they don't always have meat, although that's always the priority. And if you look at tribes throughout history, like this Dr. Weston Price that visited tribes in the early 1900s before they were, say, modernized.
Who was that?
Dr. Weston Price.
Dr. Weston Price.
He was a dentist from America, or Canada, I think it was America, that visited indigenous groups all around the world in the early 1900s. So this is before they were modernized. And he basically observed what their health and their lifestyle. This is like fascinating, before the internet, so people had no idea what was going on. And all of these groups, one of the observations that he made, just talking about the meat and the cooking, is that all of them cherished the animal products more than anything else. That was the prized possession. And there was not a single vegan group anywhere in the world, and he went to all corners of the world. So all of them cherished the animal products. But the reason why I think they started cooking is because they were already cooking other things. So whenever they couldn't get the animal products, which were always the priority in every single tribe, and it's not like they were reading science that meat is healthy. It's like they knew instinctively that this was the best thing. So I think as they try to get meat, sometimes maybe they can't, right? That's the nature of hunting and
So what kind of things would they cook?
Well, they might cook, let's say, some potatoes, tubers, like there's kind of wild potatoes, things like that, wild starches that they might boil. And so as you're boiling these starches, maybe someone just said, oh, let's throw the meat in there or something like that. And then so that was maybe one reason. Do you
need to cook like vegetables, or like is there anything that you need to cook?
Well, if you can, generally it's going to be hard to eat any kind of starch if it's raw. Maybe you could eat a raw potato, but it wouldn't necessarily be very pleasant. So that's something that typically would be more beneficial to cook than to eat raw. Outside of, let's say, potatoes, in terms of natural food, obviously processed food is different, but natural foods, outside of starches, there's really nothing I would say that I can think of that would be more healthy.
How about water? Like, I know our water's mostly polluted in most parts of the world. We're in Finland right now, where it's apparently the best.
That's what they say.
I have this water bottle. I've had so many people be like, "Why are you drinking out of a water bottle? It's the tap is fine. You know that, right?" I'm like, "I'm sorry. I'm just used to the habit 100%. Of drinking out of one." But like, do you need, like, say all of our water was clean? Do you need to boil that to like get the bacteria and stuff out, or
not at all, actually? And some of the healthiest waters, like this brand, obviously this is milk, we can maybe talk about that in a minute, but there's this one brand from Georgia called Borjomi, which is very good water. There's another brand called Gerolsteiner, and these waters, the reason why they're so good, and you can buy Gerolsteiner in the US, the reason they're so good is actually because they are more dirty, meaning more natural. They actually have more bacteria, but let's say the right kind or beneficial bacteria in them. So the clean water or purified water or distilled water isn't necessarily better. Actually, you could actually say that it's actually less healthy to drink boiled water, because it has, once you boil it, you damage all of the minerals and you kill all of the bacteria in that boiling process. So dirty.
Are there any negative effects of drinking water without bacteria?
Well, generally, let's say you drink reverse osmosis water, which is the process of filtration that people use.
I have a reverse osmosis machine, but I put vitamins back into it. Yeah,
see, that's what science does. Science likes to play God mode there, right? And you're thinking it's the same. That's almost the same as making synthetic meat, where you say we don't need the cow. We can, science. We can play God here, and we can make the cow in a petri dish. But that's not how it works. It's infinitely complex, the reality of it. So I would say, in my opinion, of course, you can do whatever you like, but I would say that it's not going to work like that. Like, it's not so simple.
What's a better option for water?
Well, that's an interesting point. Personally, I hardly actually drink water. I've hardly drunk water for 4 years, and it's actually much better to hydrate from something like raw milk, which actually contains a lot of nutrients in it.
Really?
Yeah, because raw milk has, or let's say any other natural fluid, whether it's juices or even raw meat itself is...
You mentioned earlier at dinner that the raw meat was hydrating.
It's 70% water in raw meat, so it's extremely hydrating. It's much better, and this is something that, let's say if someone was to start experimenting with raw foods, they would almost immediately, within a couple of days or so, notice that the requirement for water decreases massively because they're actually being hydrated from the food.
There's not as much salt in it as well.
That's also true. Salt can be quite dehydrating, so if you consume less salt, you feel less thirsty, you have less of a dry mouth.
That's really interesting. So tell me about raw milk. Why?
Sure.
So I think I saw a statistic. It's 80% of African Americans are lactose intolerant.
Right.
And 90% of Asians are lactose intolerant.
Yeah.
I think 67% of the world has lactose intolerance, but you can fix this by drinking raw milk.
Well, it's not that you fix it, it's that you don't have any of the symptoms that people would associate with lactose intolerance when you drink raw milk. And
that's everyone.
That's in my experience, and I've put probably thousands of people to drink raw milk. In my experience, there's maybe 1% of people or less that can actually really struggle to digest raw milk. But I do believe that would be curable over time. But let's say 99.9% of people would be able to digest raw milk completely fine. Some of the mistakes that people make is that, let's say, they say, oh, I'm lactose intolerant, but I read that I can drink raw milk, or Oscar told me I can drink raw milk. So then they go to a raw milk place and they get very excited, and then they might take a quart of raw milk, or like a pint of raw milk, straight from the fridge, so it's cold, which is already makes it difficult to digest, and then they drink it really quickly. And then they might have some stomach issues and they say, I can't drink raw milk. But that's because they took a large amount, so they were gulping raw milk and drinking it cold. But raw milk, where does it actually come from? It comes from the teat of an animal, whether it's a human breast milk or a cow or a goat or whatever it is. And so
you drink milk straight from the source?
100%.
That's crazy to me.
But raw milk, when it comes, let's say, straight from the source, whether it's human breast milk, which most of us have drunk when we're born, which is actually a form of raw milk, it's actually very warm. So in Celsius, it would be like 25 degrees Celsius.
Do you have to refrigerate raw milk?
Well, it will start to ferment after a few hours if you don't. So that's usually why people do it. That's even one of the reasons why pasteurization was created, because raw milk, it starts to, let's say, go bad, or it starts to change form it starts to sour slightly very quickly. So that's one of the arguments for actually pasteurizing milk, is to say that, well, if we do raw milk, then there's going to be a lot more waste. People will...
Seems to be a common theme with diets and businesses. What lasts the longest?
Right.
What can we sell more of?
Right.
And at what cost? The cost of... I mean, is it a thing... So you're from the UK, right? Is it a thing like in UK schools to have the... what is it? Drink milk? Branding?
I remember that when I was a kid.
There was a campaign, a huge campaign in America. I can't remember what it was called. There's a huge Got Milk campaign in America where every single school has cartons of milk, and that's the main thing that you consume. But it's kind of crazy when you think about it. There's a lot of Black, Latino, Asian kids in those schools, and that's the only thing they're drinking. And I can't imagine what it's doing to them.
Well, if it's pasteurized milk, it's definitely not going to be beneficial. Of course, correlation's not causation, but if you look at the graphs of when milk started to be pasteurized and the incidences increasing in allergies, all kinds of health issues over the past 100 years since they started to pasteurize milk have increased massively. So there is a kind of correlation there, and that would be, in my experience, which is with thousands of people, seeing that raw milk is one of the essential foods. If you have allergies, for example, it's hay fever, or dust mites, any kind of allergies, pet allergies, raw milk would be one of the most important foods that you would drink to cure it if you were motivated.
Dude, I have such bad allergies.
Okay.
I'm allergic to cats, dogs, all the things you just mentioned, but I drank a ton of milk growing up. You're right. I can tell. But
no, but if it wasn't raw milk, then it might even make them worse, actually.
Yeah, but if I did drink raw milk, would that fix those allergies?
I would say there's a very high chance. If you were to drink raw milk consistently for 3 months every day, let's say 2 pints, you would probably reduce your allergies 80 to 100%.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Fix your allergies with raw milk.
The allergies is one of the strongest, let's say, symptoms that can be cured with food.
Can I try this?
Go ahead. This one does not taste the best. This is goat milk.
Oh.
Yeah, goat milk has a kind of goaty taste, and it's at room temperature. So yeah,
wow.
don't smell it when you drink it.
It's not bad.
It's not bad. It's not bad. If you add honey, it's going to taste much better. Cow milk tastes way
You
better.
add honey to it usually?
Yeah, it tastes much nicer. It tastes like vanilla ice cream or something.
Huh. That's really interesting.
So yeah, I was saying about the allergies. Allergies is like one of the easiest problems to fix with food, essentially, with nutrition. But the allergy industry is allergy medication is one of the top. I think 3 of the top 100 pharmaceutical drugs are allergy medications. So there's a big incentive not to do that, essentially, which is completely understandable because we all like money and stuff. But
I mean, I've been taking Zyrtec every single day since I was like 6 years old.
Right.
And like a thing called Flonase. It's like a nasal
the nasal spray. Yeah. You could come off it if you wanted to. By raw milk would be like one of.
Do you think there are negative effects of those drugs?
I think it would delay the process of being able to fix your allergies without them. It kind of there always has a side effect. That's a consequence of any medication. There's always a side effect just by definition of taking a medication. But not to say that it couldn't be reversed. That's kind of also one of the, let's say, mind-opening things about when you understand nutrition and genetics is that you actually see anything can be reversed over time. So yeah, you could. I would say there would be a high chance that you could fix those allergies pretty fast.
It's really interesting.
Yeah.
Let me check my notes here.
Sure.
My next question was, can you fix allergies? How can you boost your testosterone with your diet?
I mean, in terms of testosterone, usually when people talk about testosterone, they would refer to like having high energy, high libido, for example. That would be a symptom of high testosterone. So if you wanted to increase your energy levels and your libido, then one of the most important things would actually be consuming adequate amount of fats. That's the thing that most people don't do. And partly because since the 60s we had the fear-mongering campaigns against cholesterol and saturated fat. So prior to the 60s, people actually ate generally a very high-fat, low-sugar diet, or much more than we do today. And then they had those campaigns in the 60s. And ever since then, it reversed. So then you did low-fat, high-carb, high-sugar. So
where do you get fats from?
The best place to get fat is always animal products, because that's the fat that is actually most similar to what you have in yourself. So that's how nutrition was originally studied. It was looking at dissecting the human body and understanding that if we eat what we actually have inside of us, that is the best thing for us to, let's say, regenerate at the cellular level. So that's actually the best thing is actually to eat the thing that's closest to us, which would be other animals. Obviously, cannibalism is not necessarily something that's on the cards for humans today. But let's say
I have so much to ask you now.
The next step would be some kind of mammal, like a cow, for example. That would be quite similar to what we have, but underneath our skin. Because if you peel off all of the skin on a human, it's essentially a ribeye steak, some fat, and organs. And what's the healthiest thing for humans is to eat steaks, fats, and organs. So that's basically how it goes. But humans like to complicate things, and then the further you go from what we have inside of us, when you start going to bananas and vegetables and fruits and whatever, that is very far away from what we are. So it has less utility in the human body. So
what other things boost your testosterone? Like I know training heavy martial arts is associated with high testosterone.
Sure.
A lot of those guys go bald early, and that's a symptom of high testosterone.
It can be a symptom of high testosterone to lose your hair, definitely. I mean, often when people say high testosterone, they're also just talking about having more confidence, right? And I think so much of testosterone is actually just psychological. And
so you're saying these things, do they actually boost your number of tests?
You mean your blood level testosterone?
Or are the things associated with it more so what's being aided?
Well, the thing with blood level testosterone is it can vary so much. So I've measured my own testosterone dozens of times. I've seen blood work of hundreds of people, hundreds of guys, literally. And there's a lot of variation, So you can never pin down exactly what's going on. And if you take a test at 6 in the morning versus 9 versus 12 versus 3 p.m., the range can vary 40%.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't get too attached to the blood work. That is an experiment in a way, or it is a theory. And so you don't want to be too involved in theories. You understand that it's a theory, things can change. So I would focus always more on subjectively, are you satisfied with your energy levels? Are you satisfied with your focus? Do you feel like you need to take a nap every few hours or in the afternoon? Those for me are much more telling and actually much more concrete and important than the blood work itself. But of course I like to do the blood work sometimes. But for me, someone that's high testosterone is going to have consistently high energy, high libido, desire to sleep with a lot of women. Those would be the symptoms of, or having someone that has high testosterone would display those kinds of character traits or those symptoms. So I would focus always on those things, and that's going to be much more satisfying for the person.
Do you think your diet or your exercise has more of an effect on?
Definitely the diet, for sure.
Really?
But also exercise can actually have the opposite effect. So I see it all the time where people do a lot of cardio, a lot of long distance running, things like that, and then you see their blood work and it's like testosterone's in the 300 or 400s, and you say, well, I'm not surprised, because it's a very strenuous, high stress, not conducive to producing testosterone. So exercise can have an impact too, and but diet is going to be the most important thing by miles.
What do you think of Brian Johnson's diet?
Brian Johnson, the vegan, almost billionaire, I suppose.
Yeah.
I think that guy is going to die probably in the next 20 years if he doesn't change what he's doing.
20 years?
Yeah, maximum.
Wow.
If he doesn't change what he's doing, because one, he's a vegan, and we already know how vegans go long term. There's this YouTube series which has actually been removed on YouTube called Epitome of Veganism, and it's a compilation of vegans, and you see what happens to them over time. It's like someone that's 7 years vegan. By that 7th year, almost always, they're showing massive signs of decaying. Basically, they're dying. They have no fat inside of them because their body's composed of raw animal fat. But if you're not eating any raw animal fat, you start to have very dry. You start to age a lot. So that's what's going to happen to him if he doesn't change what he's doing. So he'll gradually start to decay more and more because he's not consuming any animal products, and he is an animal product himself. So he needs to actually consume himself to replicate and to renew himself. So that's one thing. Then there's the aspect of all the supplementation, which has never really been done before over the long term. Now there is some studies anecdotally that people say that they consumed a lot of supplements, maybe similar level to what he's doing, and they actually started to develop tumors. So that's to be seen. Then there's all the technology that he's using, such as MRI scans, but the amount of radiation from an MRI scan is enormous, the amount of EMF radiation specifically. And that's enough to change your cells essentially in a negative way. So I think routinely doing something as aggressive as an MRI scan, it cannot continue doing that without some severe consequences.
You told me something about like needing animal products to fix your cells or something like that, right?
Yeah, because your body is composed of raw animal fat, muscle, and organs. So that is what you need to be able to renew itself. That's how the body works, right? In order to regenerate the cells, you need to consume those cells from other animals. And the theory would be that the more similar the cells are to your own, the easier it is for your body to utilize those. And the proteins, etc., they're in a form that your body can actually utilize.
So do you think, this isn't scientifically studied, but would you say it's possible that vegans are more likely to get cancer? Cancer is
more about toxins than, it's both nutrition, health, like nutrition and toxins. That would be the thing that actually causes cancer or creates a cancer in the body. So most of the time, I think that vegans can actually be in the short term healthier, because once you get into veganism, not these days with Beyond Meat and stuff like that, but usually when people go vegan, they might start to go more into like a natural lifestyle. They might even start doing some of the things I do, like avoiding chemical products and stuff like that. So that can actually be good.
Yeah. But that's why a lot of vegans are generally healthier than your average American, I would say.
It's close. It's close.
It's close.
Yeah, over a 10-year period, it's close. For sure. But yeah, so I'd say in the beginning, maybe you can be good by trying to be conscious of everything that you're putting on your body, eating, etc., and that's where they can actually maybe have some improvements to their health. But in the short term, over the long run, the vegan will start to have massive problems for sure. That's where you see it's always very funny once you really understand this, and you watch those vegans what I eat in a day videos, and what you can see in the vegan, and this is even after a few months vegan, that everything that they eat is replicating fat. So they obsess with avocados, cashew cream, cashew milk, all of these things.
Every vegan I know, their favorite food is French fries.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, or like potatoes or something.
There's a lot of oil there. Maybe the texture kind of replicates.
I'm like, that's not what you think of when you think of vegan. You think, like maybe they like strawberries or something. But it's like, oh no, they like the stuff that's bad for you.
The processed foods, right? Because it's going to be a lot of dopamine when you eat a French fry. It's going to have salt, which is the minerals. It's going to have oil in it, and that's going to be very addictive because that oil is the same as, well, not the same, of course, but it kind of replicates fat. And the thing that the human body craves more than anything is fat, which is why when people drink raw milk, it's actually very addicting. And people will really crave the raw milk. If they drink a bit, they might say the next day, I kind of want some more. So your body, the thing that it most requires is raw animal fats. And so you can kind of trick your brain into thinking that it's getting some raw animal fat through the texture of, say, an avocado. It's like a creamy texture. But that will never satisfy the real craving, which is actually the raw animal fat itself. But you can kind of temporarily trick the brain, which is why when you see a vegan video of what I eat and they're eating vegan ice cream, they start orgasming in food. It's a very classic sign of someone that has an eating disorder. And I know because I used to have a big eating disorder 6 years ago myself. So when anyone's orgasming in their videos eating like a ice cream or guacamole or something, it's because they're so starving for raw animal fat. And they're tricking their brain temporarily with the texture of the fat in their mouth. Does that make sense? So they kind of their brain temporarily thinks that it's getting this raw fat, but of course it doesn't. It's avocado, which is not unhealthy food, but it's not going to give you the same nutrients as, say, if you drink a bunch of raw milk, or if you eat some raw cream, for example.
Why do you think people are vegan?
Well, it's a religion. That's kind of one reason people are...
Veganism is a religion?
100%. And people are very... Because it's a belief system. Any belief system, you could say, is a religion. And it's nothing that we can actually see with our eyes that they look healthier. So then it's, okay, well, what is it actually about? Because if you do not look... If there's nothing that we can observe with our eyes that vegans are healthier over, let's say, 10 years, then why would you do it? Well, then there's a lot of fear of death, for example. People are very out of touch with the fact that humans, we are essentially animals and we all will die. And people are very out of touch with that cycle of life. And they think that they can play God and hack the cycle of life and remove themselves from life requires life, and that we all die. So that's one thing. And so...
Yeah, it's so ironic that like claim to be on this moral high ground of like, don't kill the animals. But like, I can't imagine the things you must be doing from an immoral point of view to like make like Beyond Meat, like I can't imagine like where that's made, or like just like vegan ice cream. It's like, what goes into that? I'm sure there's some animal dying somewhere.
Well, even the soil itself, let's say 1,000 years ago, the soil in the forest, it has loads of dead animals in it, because the animal dies, it goes in the soil, and it's like I was describing earlier with the raw frog. Say if we died and we go in the soil and we die on the floor, over a few days or weeks, we will decompose into the soil, and then you have a tomato in that soil that the vegan eats, and they say this is cruelty free, or this is no one died for this tomato, but it's not true, because the bodies or the animals that nourish the soil created the nutrients in the tomato.
Are vegetables and fruit always a result of like decomposition? Like, is it possible to make them without?
Well, you can synthesize like they do these days soil. The nutrients in the soil with synthetic chemicals, but I would argue that it's not going to produce there's not going to be as many nutrients in the fruit or the vegetable itself. One of the reasons I like ordering Amish food in Pennsylvania is because they actually use natural fertilizer.
They use manure instead of soil.
Exactly, for example, and they also do things like they let the grass grow very high, and so it's kind of like a matured grass which has much more nutrients in it as the older it is, and things like that. So you can try and create something synthetic, but this is generally the theme, and that's what science likes to do. It tries to play the God mode and create these sterile things, but generally you always see that nature wins every time.
You're talking earlier a bit about like how humans are animals, so we eat animals. I have done a lot of videos about serial killers, so it's just my general interest. You also spoke about indigenous groups, and some indigenous tribes have been known to indulge in cannibalism from time to time. Have you read anything about cannibalism?
I thought you were going to say, have you tried cannibalism?
I was going to ask you. I was going to ask you where does food you tried, and I'm hoping you haven't said human, but...
No, I haven't. Yeah, I mean, cannibalism is interesting. I do think that should it be a healthy human, which no human is today, unfortunately, even the tribes, they've all been modernized with Coca-Cola and Pepsi. I do think if you were to eat a really, truly healthy human, let's say from 1 million years ago, the idea of that, at least, that was only eating raw food, I think that would be the healthiest thing to eat, 100%. Eating another raw human that was only eating raw food is 100% the healthiest thing. But
the healthiest thing you can eat is another person.
I would say so.
But not now, you think?
Well, not a human today, because none of us are very healthy. The moment that we're born, we're exposed to all kinds of chemicals in the air. And
I can't get over that statement.
Yeah.
That's right. So, okay, so Do you think it was common for people to eat other people? Like,
Probably.
it was after they died, or like maybe on the battlefield? I guess
on the battlefield, and in a way, it's kind of you could say it's quite pragmatic to do so, right? It's like if you
makes sense.
If you have a healthy person, it's kind of honoring them, and you know, you could see it as that way if you wanted to. This is not my own perspective, but like you could see it that way. It could be like a sacrifice thing. But it's not necessarily. Yeah, it doesn't have to be unhealthy. It's just not what we do in our society today. You know,
the healthiest thing you can eat is a human. Wow. Would you ever try human?
I can't. I mean, I would never eat a human unless it was
like if like someone
healthy.
donated their body to science and like.
But they would have to be so healthy that it would be impossible for me to want to do that. You know what I mean? It's also a lot of toxins actually accumulate over generations. So you'd have to. There'll probably need to be like a 10-generation reversal of toxins in a perfect environment, which it would be impossible to do for a human to actually be worth consuming, to be honest.
Interesting. Do you think you'll donate your body to be eaten? Because if you're on this diet, you should be a prime candidate.
Well, in a way, right? I would say I'm definitely less toxic than 99.9999% of people, but
that'd be an interesting legacy, you know?
Yeah.
Everyone tried me, they did a study to see if it was good for you, and then the world went back to cannibalism.
That would be hilarious, but I don't see it happening.
What's the strangest food you've eaten?
I ate a sheep fetus. Raw.
You what?
A fetus. So that basically I was in Belgium living on a farm, and it was the beginning of Corona, and we were kind of bored, and we wanted to.
We were kind of bored, so we ate a sheep fetus.
Well, we basically spoke to this farmer guy, and we said, "Hey, we want to kill a sheep and eat it." You know, it's like normal thing to do once upon a time.
Yeah.
So we got this sheep, and he picked one for us, and we took it to the forest, and I killed it with a knife, halal style, and what did you say?
I said halal style.
Halal style with a knife, and we hung it up, you know, processed it, butchered it as you would, and
Did
then
you clean it at all?
No, you don't. There's nothing to clean. It's fine.
Yeah.
So it's like hanging. We're processing it, and then when you're butchering, you cut down the middle.
Did you eat it raw?
Of course. So then we
just imagining you like ripping out a fetus from a mother sheep.
It was very primal. It was very primal. So we'll kind of open the sheep as you do when you kill an animal to remove the organs, suddenly it's like, wait, what's this thing? It's like this weird light pink thing, and kind of open it up, and then we're like, oh, it's a placenta, and then you kind of open the placenta, and there's like 6 little sheep fetuses in there.
Oh, so we all split it.
And
I was like, pizza party.
I was like, well, look, I'm gonna try this for the novelty, because I don't think many people will ever get to try this. So I was like,
do you have a photo?
I'll try it. Yeah, I have a picture.
I'm gonna get you to send that to me.
Yeah, I can show you. It's pretty funny. And I just took a bite of the sheep fetus. It had like small bones in it already, but very soft. And the placenta actually tasted amazing, because it was like sugar. It tasted like pineapple actually, because I think the sheep was giving a lot of glucose to the children, to the babies or whatever. And so the sheep fetus, or the placenta, was really tasty. The fetus, not so nice. But so then I tried.
You know, I've studied a lot of serial killers, a lot of cannibals, and I think you would be a prime candidate. Do you think you're like a highly empathetic person still, or?
No, I mean, I do it from the perspective of it's good for health. You know, it's not. It doesn't go any further.
But in general, do you think you have lots of empathy?
I wouldn't say that's something that would be like someone would describe me as that, or I wouldn't describe.
Like if a friend called you crying, like you'd be able to talk to them. Surely,
100%.
But like, would you like feel like sad for them?
It would be hard to do that. I think it's more. It would be like I like them, so I can kind of. I wouldn't necessarily be a sponge for their feelings, but
that makes sense.
I can kind of feel bad for them.
I'm kind of similar. I think that's why I've been able to read so many stories of.
I like reading the serial killer stuff, like Jeffrey Dahmer and stuff like that. It's really interesting. It's a lot of crazy psychology there.
Yeah, it makes me wonder if there's like those people just have that innate instinct from like cannibalism, and
I think it's a lot of anger. I think the serial killers, where they feel like they can't let go or something, and that's why I can't remember his name. Is it not Ken Hovind? The one guy, Kent something, that killed his mum and ate his mum.
And that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, and that guy, it's like he couldn't forgive his mother. You know, he needed to let go basically, and he couldn't do it. You know.
I've noticed a lot of the time too with these like weird cases that it's often a fetish in some way, or it's sexually charged. Like I think a lot of Jeffrey Dahmer's crimes were probably sexually charged.
Right.
And I don't know. I think it's rare that they just wanted to eat them or like crawl inside their mother's skin or some weird
really
thing
foul.
because they just like to do that activity. You know, it's just like some form of fetish, which is
Well,
bizarre.
it's interesting. I think humans we're all capable of doing those things basically, but we find a different way to channel the energy that we might have, the kind of self-destructive or freaky energy and desire for weird stuff that we have in different ways, right? And
Humans are weird.
for sure, we have some weird, you know, possibly capable of many things basically.
Yeah.
And
People forget where we come from, you know.
right, that's kind of a lot of what this nutritional exploration that I'm doing is. It's really exploring where we come from. It's very difficult for people to accept, you know, and people have a lot of hang-ups about bacteria especially. That's one of the greatest source of hang-ups in society is disgust at bacteria and essentially disgust at oneself and not accepting that that's actually where we come from. It's, it's like my friend, he had a baby.
Yep.
And he follows a similar, let's say, lifestyle and nutrition principles that I follow. And he had a baby a couple of years ago. And,
He didn't drink the milk, did he?
No, the baby's on the milk for sure.
Oh, I meant him.
Oh no, he was drinking the milk for sure. You mean like cow, like raw milk?
Oh, no, his like wife's milk.
Oh,
Yeah.
no. I mean, I think he tried it just for the novelty, but like
I probably would try that.
Yeah,
as well.
yeah, just for a
maybe
taste.
that's strange, but
But yeah, so my friend had this baby, and he said, "I'm gonna try and raise this baby in the most primal way possible," you know, and this baby is like this baby's born, you know, no medication, and then the baby's just drinking raw milk, and you know, after a few months, this baby, you know, in the baby books, they recommend you wait till 6 months before you feed some soft foods, and then you start with like boiled potatoes and whatever. He was like, forget all of that. So this baby's maybe 2 or 3 months old, and he starts to feed it, you know, some raw meat, essentially, some raw fish, some raw organs, and this baby is just like loving it, absolutely loving it, and it kind of...
he was able to chew it?
Well, it kind of like masticates it on the roof of its mouth and then swallows some, spits some out, and it really enjoys these raw foods. And this is one of the biggest pieces of evidence I've ever seen to point towards that this is actually really good. This baby is like much bigger than babies of the same age. It's much more relaxed. It's much more satisfied, and as a result of being relaxed, I think it's relaxed because of the foods that it's eating. It's very nourished. So it's not complaining about anything. It has everything that it needs, essentially, from a food standpoint.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really cry as a normal baby does. It doesn't complain like a normal baby does. It's very relaxed, and it's much larger. And visibly...
How old is the kid?
Now it's maybe 2 years old or something.
2 years old?
Yeah, it looks great. You know?
Are the parents larger? Or are you just saying it's particularly large?
No, because of the
for a
food
baby?
that it's eating. It's bigger. It's bigger than the other babies. It's stronger. It's more aggressive. High testosterone. It's much more calm and relaxed, and that's from the foods that we're eating. But my point was about this baby was it's very interesting to see that this baby itself, it's completely untraumatized, and that's how we're born, right? We're not born with any traumas. We have no body shame. We have no disgust at, you know, our human fluids, right? And that all comes later. So it's very interesting to see this baby. It's very primal, and you'd see like if this baby was by itself, it would just be in a forest naked, you know, and shitting everywhere and whatever. Yeah. And that's kind of what it's doing. And it's only humans that then we traumatize ourselves and our children at body shame first. Let's remove all, you know, you can't be naked in public, or you have to hide yourself, things like that. And then it's discussed at our own human fluids, right? So the baby shits everywhere. And then humans are like, oh, that's disgusting, you know, and the baby loves it. The baby's like using the shit, rubbing it on its face and stuff like that. It has no disgust. And it's only the adults that then disgust the baby, create the disgust in the baby by saying, oh, you need to wash your hands, and oh, this is bad, don't do this, this is disgusting, you know, you start to kind of...
When I was a kid, my parents tell me often, they're like, yeah, one time we came in your room and you rubbed shit all over the walls, and I was like, they had to clean it up, and I was like, well, now you're making me feel better about it. I used to think like, damn, I was a weird kid, but
right.
Maybe it's just primal.
I think it's what kids do naturally. Even they eat their own shit, you know, this baby.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, and then obviously maybe you don't want to let that happen, but that's I think it's actually okay to do that from a health standpoint. But
you eat your own shit?
No, I've never done that. At all, definitely not. But I think
Just
you
because
can.
it's conventionally gross.
Well, it's disgusting, you know.
But like, what does the science say about it?
About eating shit.
Yeah.
Well, there was actually a book written by a biochemist called Arjunas Vonderplanitz, who died in 2013.
What was it one more time?
Arjunas Vonderplanitz, and
Okay.
he died in 2013. He was arguably potentially killed, some people say, by the CIA. And he actually wrote a book called Eat Shit and Live. And it was to say that when someone has cancer, one of the best things that they could do is actually to consume feces of a healthy animal, because it has all of these microbes in it that help you to digest the nutrients that you're consuming. And they also feed you a lot of bacteria, which humans are very deficient in, such as E. coli, which is actually has its own health benefits to consuming E. coli. So he actually wrote this book, and he would even sell his feces, because he was, I think he was in his 60s before he died, and he was supposedly a very healthy guy, and he only ate raw food for many decades. And he would sell.
This episode is actually sponsored by Oscar's Feces. If you want to buy, click the top link in the description below.
So he sold his feces to cancer patients who wanted to cure their cancer without or avoid using chemotherapy to heal themselves. And I was hunting in Africa last year, and I had this understanding that eating feces is good. And I was hunting zebras in Africa, and there was zebra shit everywhere. And I was very close to eating some. But then I was with my girlfriend at the time, and I didn't want it to smell if I was going to be kissing her.
What were the results of the people eating the feces that had cancer?
Yeah, so, according to Arjunas and his records, I don't know the exact numbers, but it was a significant, more than half of his patients survived, basically. And usually the only ones that died.
And they didn't do chemo?
Yeah, this is without chemo.
So all of them, none of them did chemo, and they all ate the feces, right?
Yeah, well, the thing with chemo, there was a scientist in one of the universities in California, and he testified before court to say that patients who avoided chemotherapy versus the ones who did, his patients as a doctor, they lived on average, I think it was 12 years longer than those who did the chemotherapy.
Did they do any treatments?
No, without the conventional cancer treatment.
So just no treatments at all? Or
Well, I don't know exactly, but it was avoiding chemotherapy. They lived longer than those who did it.
My best friend in 7th grade, his name was Gauguin. He had a cancer called histiocytic sarcoma. And it was pretty much a death sentence. And there was only one other kid in the US that had it besides him. And he didn't do chemotherapy. And I was like, fuck, he's gonna die. I was so sad about it. I was like, he has these, I guess, naturalist parents or a naturalist mom perhaps. And he ended up being fine.
Right.
He's doing okay in Kentucky now. I guess
Right.
I saw a photo of him the other day. But
Well, that's
really
the thing with the medical system. They're very fear-inducing. So they will always say, "Oh, thank God that we just did this surgery because you were about to have this situation. Oh, thank God that we just removed your tooth because otherwise they all would have got infected." And so that's always the pattern that you see. It's very, thank God we did this because you were about to die like your friend.
Yeah.
And what I've observed now, having avoided all medical treatments in myself, including some very serious situations, and seeing it in other people, is that it's just not the case, basically. And it's a lot of fear that we create in our heads, but it's not actually what happens in reality. And, that guy I was talking about, Mr. Arjunas Vonderplanitz, he had a famous quote that he said, 99% of the time, if you do the opposite of what the medical system tells you, you're going to be right. So I do believe, if I had to put a number on it, I would probably say 90% of surgeries are completely unnecessary.
Really?
And yeah, I would personally, there would be very few situations where I would actually accept some kind of surgery.
What are the few pieces of medical advice you take?
Well,
do you brush your teeth?
So I brush my teeth, but not in the way that other people do it. So there's a theory that I believe in as well, that when you start to eat a lot of raw food, your body starts to detox very effectively. And humans from medications, injections, things of that nature, have actually eating a lot of, breathing in a lot of very toxic air, have a lot of mercury and aluminum in their body. A lot of injections that we get as children have a lot of mercury in it. A lot of medication has mercury in it. And that really accumulates largely in the brain. And so, because it's very concentrated in the brain, the theory would explain that your body, during sleep, detoxifies the mercury from your brain into your gums. And that's actually what plaque is. It's a buildup of heavy metals into the plaque as the body tries to remove it, right? The body has a natural cleansing mechanism. It wants to live, essentially. And so it's important to brush your teeth. And I've seen this with people when they do when they start to eat a lot of raw food, they think, oh, my diet's so healthy, I don't need to brush my teeth.
Do you use toothpaste?
Well, I'll get to it.
Yeah.
So people think that their diet it can happen a lot. And I used to think it as well. If your diet is perfect, why do I need to brush my teeth? And that's because your body isn't actually perfect as, say, it could have been 5,000 years ago when we were all living in an organic planet. We have a lot of these toxins. So the body removes a lot of the toxins via the plaque. And if you do not brush your teeth, and I've seen this, you will get some kind of gum infection, basically. So it's important to brush your teeth 100%. It doesn't matter what your diet is. You have to brush your teeth at least 3 times a week, at least. So I do brush my teeth. I do it every day now, especially in the morning, because your body dumps the plaque overnight. It builds up overnight, so you want to remove the plaque in the morning. But I don't use toothpaste. I use either nothing, because nothing is better than some kind of chemical in my perspective. I would use coconut oil. That works very well. Or sometimes I use olive oil. Any kind of fat is going to be beneficial. If I have nothing, I might...
Why is that? Why do you need those things?
It's a solvent, right? Yeah. So it's going to help to dissolve the plaque there. And it's also easier to brush with some kind of fluid than just a dry brushing.
My cousin is a dentist, actually, and I asked her when I was young, I was like, what kind of toothpaste is best?
Right.
And I just remember her saying it doesn't matter, just the act of brushing is what's important.
Right.
But I guess on that...
Well, that's true, but you want to... The way I look at things is avoid chemicals.
Yeah.
So you can brush with anything that hasn't got chemicals in it. It's going to be probably fine.
How bad is fluoride?
Well, it's an interesting one. You know, some people would say that Hitler was using fluoride to make his prisoners more...
Here's where we go into conspiracy theory. Everyone comments, and it should be illegal for everyone to have a podcast. As soon as you hear the word fluoride, it's oh no. But what did Hitler do with fluoride?
Some people say that Hitler was using fluoride to make his prisoners more docile, more dumbed down, essentially. That might be true. Some people would say that's not true. I don't know exactly.
How would he give them fluoride?
Probably via an injection. So that would be one thing. Some people say that that's what it does. It makes you kind of dumb.
Can it go through your mucous membranes in your gums?
Anything that you put on the skin, whether it's your gums, whether it's the skin on your arms, your scalp, everything there is absorbed into the bloodstream. So it doesn't matter where you put it on your skin. That's even why you generally want to follow the principle. If you wouldn't eat it, don't put it on your body or in your mouth or anything. That's kind of how I see it, because everything will be digested, basically.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it's a simple principle you can follow like that.
Zins are getting really popular in America. We're in Finland right now. Snus, as they call it. But a lot of people think it's a better alternative to cigarettes. Some people even talk about the nootropic benefits of nicotine, comparing it to like caffeine, like having a black coffee. I think it's pretty well, I think it's believed among most Americans that smoking a cigarette is not the best thing for you in the world, or perhaps consuming like a Starbucks latte. But like black coffee and like nicotine itself, I think people make good arguments that those aren't the worst things and even have benefits.
Yeah.
What do you think about nicotine and caffeine?
Well, they definitely can help you to do things by improving your focus levels, but it only helps you to do things that you don't really want to do in the first place. If you actually think about it, because if you really want to do something, you can go in the flow state without those things, right? So that's why, America 9 to 5 runs on black coffee, because it's very good at helping you grind on things that you don't really want to do. So that's kind of the more metaphysical.
A gazelle in the jaw of a tiger does not need motivation,
right?
Perhaps.
Exactly. Yeah. So they or even the tiger itself to get this gazelle doesn't need the caffeine, for example.
Yeah.
So there's that. Then there's also from like the physical health standpoint. Generally when you take anything isolated like that, because all of those things are isolated, natural compounds. So they might even source caffeine and nicotine from something natural, like a tobacco leaf or whatever. But that's in that case, it always exists with many other things inside. Let's say nicotine in a tobacco leaf. You have the nicotine there, which is a natural chemical, but it's always there with a million other things. And so nature generally, it has always the antagonistic compounds present in something. So they always complement each other. So maybe it has the nicotine, but it contains something else which helps balance the nicotine in the body so it's not toxic. So when you isolate something, which is what a medication is, it's an isolated natural compound, such as isolating a nicotine, that's where you start to have problems because it doesn't have anything else to balance it out.
I've thought about this. Yeah, I've thought about that. this sounds stupid, but perhaps like something like cigarettes or like chewing tobacco could be better than a Zyn because tobacco is a natural thing. What do you think of that?
Well, that would be correct, although I would question, what's the process from tobacco leaf to getting it into this thing that you have in your hand today.
But perhaps like an American Indian smoking tobacco straight from the source hundreds of years ago.
Well, there was no pesticides, there was no Roundup. Roundup was invented 100 years ago.
That might have not been that bad for you.
Well, actually, if you look at the oldest living man ever, 146 years old, a guy, I believe in the Philippines or Indonesia, he smoked every day. So the act of smoking doesn't have to be bad. It's only the process in which the tobacco is made today using pesticides that have only been invented 100 or less years ago. That is bad, consuming those kinds of chemicals.
So do you do any nicotine or caffeine?
I don't. I used to drink 600 milligrams of caffeine a day. Energy drinks, Monsters, Red Bulls, espressos. I used to do so many of those. And what happens is when you can start to consume those, you start to rely on it for your energy. So that's why people say things like, I can't function until I have my cup of coffee in the morning.
Don't talk to me till I have my coffee.
Right, exactly. So I just decided, when I started eating raw meat and kind of experimenting, I just decided, I did, at the beginning I was still drinking coffee, but then I just decided I'm going to go without, basically, and I'm going to not be dependent on these drugs. Essentially, coffee is quite a drug. So I just decided I'm not going to do it. And what happens instead of having like super high, super low, super high, super low, which is what people get on caffeine, you just basically, you create a nice homeostasis where you're not too high and you're not too low and you're very stable. And that's probably the greatest benefit of eating raw food and avoiding caffeine, is the stability of energy. It's very, very stable.
What if you like didn't sleep last night but 3 hours, say, and had to do this podcast and you wanted to be really energetic for it, like you wouldn't drink just a cup of black coffee or something?
Maybe, and that's where you understand that it's a tool, and you can do those kinds of things where I have to drive to catch my flight and I haven't slept. And
it's definitely abused, but I do think it is perhaps like
it's a tool
just
in the
changing how much energy you have and when it is. It's like a manipulation playing.
Yeah, it's a tool in the toolkit, and even raw food is just a tool in the toolkit. It just gives you options, right? I know I can go to a forest and I'm going to be fine because I know I can kill an animal and eat it raw, right? Imagine most people, they don't know that they can actually just eat raw meat and you're going to be really healthy. So they don't even have the option of that. So in a survival situation, they have much less chances of survival because they think that they need to cook everything. It's going to kill them if they eat this raw meat. Yeah. So it's all just having greater options. And when you have more options, you're much more powerful as an individual.
That's interesting. So you went hunting in Africa.
Yeah, I went. I guess I was always interested. As soon as I got into eating raw meat, and I was always very fascinated by killing an animal basically and trying all the different organs, and I was very attracted to it because it's something that I'd never done, and maybe a bit scared of it at the same time as being attracted to it. Those kind of two energies are there at the same time. So I was very excited by the idea of like killing an animal and being able to do it, drinking the blood, things of that nature. So for me, going to Africa, I've killed dozens of farm animals and eaten them, right? When I say kill, it's about actually eating it. So it has the use. So I've already, processed many animals, cows, goats, pigs, sheep. And, but the thing is, I was very fascinated to do it with a wild animal, basically. Because one of my interests is actually drinking blood. Drinking blood is one of the healthiest things that you can do, I believe. Because it has all the minerals, it carries all the nutrients in there. As long as the animal is healthy and non-medicated, so there's nothing toxic in the bloodstream, I believe it's one of the healthiest things that you can do. Drinking blood. So I've drunk a lot of blood in the past. Cow blood, sheep blood, goat blood, pig blood.
I thought fetus of a sheep was going to be the craziest thing you said.
Yeah, blood is also freaky, I forget.
Butterflies drink blood.
There you go. They look healthy. So, so I was fascinated always by drinking blood, and it feels good drinking blood. I've drank gallons of blood in my life, and it feels great.
Is that something you do regularly?
No, because it requires the animal.
You can't buy.
I don't live on a farm at the moment, so you can't buy blood because it will start to coagulate. It becomes like jelly very quickly. So it has to be drunk fresh in the moment. And I read about the tribes that drink blood. For example, the Maasai tribe in Africa. They're generally considered some of the healthiest people in the world. They're the tallest people in Africa. and their diet consists of primarily raw milk, blood mixed with the milk, and raw meat.
The tallest tribe in Africa drinks blood.
That's the staple of their diet is cow blood, raw milk, and meat.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I was always.
Do you think height is associated with health?
Well, it makes sense that you would be larger if you consume more. For example, oxygen generally makes things bigger, right? So raw food contains a lot of oxygen. Raw milk has oxygen in it.
Does blood have oxygen?
Of course,
Yeah.
it carries the oxygen around the body.
That's what I was thinking,
So generally, yeah. But anyway, let me say about the tribe thing. So yeah, so I was always fascinated with drinking blood. I drank a lot of blood, but I never done it from a wild animal, only a farm animal. So I was very curious to drink wild animal, right? Because in Africa, the animals are wild. So they've never eaten any unnatural food, even across generations back. This is a wild animal that has never been tarnished by human pollution of any kind. So it was very interesting for me to do that. So I was like, well, I'm going to go to Africa, I'm going to shoot a zebra, I'm going to drink the blood. Like that's like exciting for me. So yeah, I basically went to Africa, went to South Africa, to a ranch, like a ranch where they have thousands of acres, tens of thousands of acres.
Yeah.
And you can't pick what you shoot. So you see something and that's it. You have your opportunity. If you want to kill it, you shoot it. So the first animal I saw on day 2 was a wildebeest, which is like a big, large bull essentially, and has huge horns. And so I took the rifle out and I shot it, and basically I shot it straight in the kind of just below the heart. It wasn't the best shot. It was my first shot, and so this wildebeest ran for about 6 hours after being tagged, after I shot it, and it ran and it ran, and these 2 trackers, which are almost like half tribes people. They have insane senses, so they can smell it, they can see drops of blood that you would never see yourself, and they tracked it down for 6 hours, and then 6 hours later we get the call that hey, we found it and it's dead now, and so basically there's this wildebeest on the floor. I have a picture of it on my Instagram. Actually, I don't put this one on Instagram, that would be too triggering. And there's this wildebeest there, and I'm like, great, this is amazing, and so I asked him, can I have a knife? To the hunter, and he's like, why? I'm like, I'm gonna eat its testicles, it's right here, like it's a dead animal, and this is what hunters used to do back in the day. So I kind of pull its leg up, I cut off this big guy's testicles, and I start eating these testicles. I had to have a video
raw
of it. Just warm raw testicle of this wildebeest.
That's like the most nutritious part.
No, it's the thing that's most available on the outside without cutting it open. It's the only organ that's on the outside of the body. So I started snacking on these guys' testicles, and these hunters are looking at me like, what the fuck? Like, you're like, I've never seen anything like this.
More of a savage than them.
Exactly. They're like, this is crazy. And then they take the animal, they process it, and I told them, bring me as much blood as you can gather from the wildebeest. I want to drink it. Yeah, and they bring me like two big liter bottles. Like,
and these guys already drink blood.
No, these are like they don't know anything about this stuff. They think it's bad. They have normal beliefs about it. And they bring me this blood. I mix it in the milk, and I drank as much of it as I could.
So you mix the blood in the milk. You don't just drink blood raw.
Well, you can drink blood raw, but it's a very strong taste. It's pretty difficult to do it, especially on a wild animal. It tasted like the smell of a wildebeest. Imagine like how you would imagine the breath of a wildebeest, like in the morning, like disgusting. And that's what the blood tasted like. So the mixing it with milk is a way to make it more palatable, but also it stops it coagulating into jelly. So that's why tribes also do it, I think, because it makes it a fluid that can be drunk even hours later. So yeah.
What are the health benefits of drinking blood?
Well, blood carries every nutrient around the body. So just based on that, you would think that it's logically the most nutritious thing to consume, has all the minerals in there. Every single nutrient is in blood. It's also going to be hydrating because it's a natural source of H2O with minerals bound to it. So yeah, it's just pure nourishment, nutrients, hydration, and also just the psychological aspect. It kind of gives you a lot of energy, let's say. And I think largely it might be placebo of like the excitement that I'm drinking this blood. But yeah, drinking blood is amazing. I would love to be able to drink blood every day, to be honest, but it's not very practical.
That makes sense. It's really interesting. Yeah, what do you think about the... Brian Johnson noted that his father was suffering from some type of dementia, and they did like some type of blood transfusion. where he gave him his blood and
Right.
he slowed down his aging like drastically. What do you think those, like, do you think there's any merit to those types of things, like blood transfusion from younger people?
Yeah, I think, well, it's the same principle, you know, they're just avoiding drinking blood. They're just doing it in a way that's more socially acceptable. But people still found that pretty freaky, right? He's, you know, injecting his son's blood, but it's just logical. It's just the same as me drinking blood. So I think it could be good. I would always question, like, what's the process to take blood from someone to give it to someone else? Does it go through some machinery with some chemicals in it? Then I would not do that myself. So that's one thing. Then there's those aging tests, which I was experimenting with those aging tests like 3 years ago when I first heard about it, because I was like, if I can create a protocol that can reverse people's age and I can consistently do it in blood work, I'm going to be a billionaire. Because like, who wouldn't pay 100 grand to slow down their age 10 years, right?
It's the most valuable thing,
right,
arguably.
Right. So in my mind, I was like, this is it. I'm going to do it. And I started to prescribe people to do these. Tests. And I was like, this is it. And what I saw is that the results of those tests mean absolutely nothing. It means nothing. It means
Aging
nothing.
tests are bullshit.
Complete horseshit. I had a client, not a patient, who was massively, 40 pounds overweight, diabetic. He weighed 240 pounds. He was maybe 5'8", so quite significantly overweight. And diabetic, taking medication for a decade. He did this aging test. He was 46, and it said that he was 35. And it's just like, this means nothing. This means absolutely nothing. This guy,
was when he was already unhealthy. Like,
yeah, this was at the start. At the start, I told him,
Okay.
let's do this aging test, because I'm very curious if we can, on paper reverse.
How old did it say you were? Did you do one yourself?
I've never done one myself. There was, I'm in my mid-20s. There's not too much point, but I took this really unhealthy guy, visibly unhealthy, on paper, extremely unhealthy, blood work awful. He does the biological age test, the most expensive one. It was like $1,000, and it says he's 10 years younger at the start. This guy's awful. So those tests for me mean absolutely nothing. It's an opinion, firstly, those tests, because they're all based on theories and averages. But the average is done on an unhealthy population. So it's the average of an unhealthy population. So those tests mean nothing to me. Zero.
That's similar thinking as to why you don't think the testosterone number matters too much.
You could say it's the same thing, right? It's a theory, and it fluctuates so much. Blood tests. There was one. The guy I was talking about earlier, Arjunus, there's one theory that explains that you would need to do a blood test 48 times a day for it to have, you need to do a blood test every other minute for it to have any kind of significance, to see the average over that kind of span. So, the blood test, it's a sample of something, but it's a theory. It doesn't necessarily mean too much, right? You can theorize and you can play games and try and understand, but it's so complex that you'll never really understand it, right? And that's kind of what science does. It tries to understand stuff.
Yeah, but let me ask you about these studies. So my sister is a neuroscientist. She tests really crazy party drugs on animals, right? To see the effects and the differences receiving them on men and women, just to study like dopamine and chemical reactions in the brain. What do you think is like the biggest issue with a lot of these studies? Like, why do you not see that much validity in like modern science?
It's not that I don't see validity. It's more, those kinds of studies are different, right? There's a difference between measuring your blood work and then making drastic conclusions on these blood works versus observing physical changes over time on an animal taking party drugs. It's quite a different kind of study. Yeah. So I'd say blood work and measuring blood work and drawing conclusions from that, for me, it doesn't pull that much weight, basically, because the variance in blood work testing, depending on time of day, day-to-day changes, is so drastic that it has no meaning to it,
But you yourself, you're a businessman, and I talked with another guest on this podcast about people's incentives, right? Like, what do you think are some incentives that some higher-ups may have that would like create skews in data or misleading studies that like lead people down certain health?
Well, humans, whether they're higher up or low or whatever position they're in, we all have this inside of us, actually. So they're not dissimilar to you and I. Let's say the medical matrix. They have a value. They have money as their value, as I do, as you do, as most people in society do. And maybe they're better actually at pursuing it, right? And they might have had more success in making money, and they have this $1 trillion medical industry. And they just have that incentive to keep it there, right? Because they feel like they need money, just like I feel like I need money, and they have a family to feed, right? And so.
But do you know anything about like how they go about that in practice?
Well,
like how do they manipulate numbers or data? Do they do that? Like,
you can make a study to do anything, basically. I mean, you can really manipulate things. You can, because a study is always based on human opinion. So you have to choose what you measure. For example, just the choosing of the measuring, that's already an opinion. And the conclusion that you make, that's also an opinion. So I can give you an example. Brian Johnson, he measures his cholesterol, and his conclusion is high cholesterol is bad. But that's an opinion. Whereas another guy is going to say high cholesterol is really good. So there's many ways to interpret data, which is why it doesn't necessarily mean too much, basically.
So what studies do you trust?
Well, a study, for example, the frog study that I showed you. So the study where the guy measures the frog, raw versus cooked frog, that's something that you can visibly see with your eyes, right? That is undeniable suggestion that raw food dissolves in stomach acid versus not. So that's a study that is clearly visible with the eye. That's a very good study, very important study. Then you see other studies like this guy called Pottinger's cats. This guy called Francis Pottinger, who had thousands of cats, and he measured these cats over 10 years on different diets. He measured cats eating cooked foods, pasteurized milk versus milk, raw foods, and his observations were that when the cats ate a raw food diet versus a cooked food diet, on the cooked food they were having hair shedding, they were having all kinds of illnesses, their jaws were getting narrower, they were having breathing problems over generations, and it gets progressively worse. Versus the cats on the raw diet seem to maintain and even improve their health, get larger, and they didn't have any of the health issues that the cats on the pasteurized or cooked diet were experiencing. So that's a very concrete study which suggests the benefits, let's say, or the negatives of eating processed pasteurized foods.
That's interesting though. So how do you think like Americans and just the world in general is living so long? Do you think we're made to live longer?
It's a really good question. So humans are very resilient, and you could say it's a blessing and a curse at the same time, right? Because we can live so long despite eating such low quality processed food. So, but what you actually perceive now as long, maybe you say, wow, he's 80 or he died at his 90s. There would be theories, and there have been people that have lived to over 110, 120, 130 years old. So that's really what humans, I believe, are more than capable of, is living 140 in the right environment, which we definitely do not have around us today. And there's even, some people that anecdotally explored tribes in the Philippines that solely ate coconuts and raw fish. And these people apparently lived to between 140 and 150 routinely. So yeah, we've come a far away from that. But yeah,
do you think people live hundreds of years?
It's an interesting question. I think maybe once upon a time it could be possible that humans could do that, but not today. But I think it's possible. I think humans potentially used to be larger than we are today, with more oxygen in the foods that we consume, more oxygen in the air as well. But that's an interesting theory, that one. It's also not just about living longer, right? Because if imagine like most 80-year-olds today, you don't want to stay in that state for too long. You think, I'd rather just die after enduring like being an old man stuck in a chair. But what you see is that it's not just about the length of your life, but it would appear that these tribes, they seem to live much higher quality life, even into old age. So what we consider a 40-year-old today is more like a tribe's 80 or 90-year-old. So the Maasai tribe, they're even impregnating women. When the male is like 85 to 90 years old, he's impregnating a 20-year-old. And that's quite unimaginable today.
Yeah. Right? I thought the evidence shows that people only used to live to like 30 or like 20.
Well, firstly, they're picking certain parts of data when they're taking those numbers. Secondly, infant mortality is reduced, just the fact that you can get an ambulance so you don't die from breaking your neck, those kinds of things. That's all factors that have improved emergency situations, so people don't die in those kinds of situations. But definitely, my opinion is that people are living much shorter lives than they can, but also the quality of life into old age, which is what you call health span, has reduced drastically. We don't have people, 85-year-olds are not impregnating women in their 20s, they're not sexually active when you get to 90, but that's definitely what we can see in tribes, humans are more than capable of that. So I think you should be able to play sports and, have sex in if you're 100 years old. It's like, it's what we perceive a 40-year-old now is essentially what a 100-year-old can be, I would say.
That's really interesting.
It's crazy.
So back to the raw foods. Is it like everything is raw? Because we went out together, you did have a cooked steak,
Right.
but like, do you eat raw chicken?
I eat raw chicken 5 times a week. Usually chicken breast is my favorite. Raw chicken is actually a delicacy in Japan. If you go to Japan, in some restaurants, you're going to see raw chicken sashimi. So what I'm doing isn't necessarily different to what's out there. It's just not what humans are doing these days. But raw chicken, usually people think that it's bad because of salmonella.
Yeah.
But I try to eat as much salmonella as possible. There's studies showing, and even study from a university in Canada where they're using salmonella, injecting it into rats with tumors, and it shows that the salmonella bacteria reduces the size of the tumor. So bacteria...
What are the supposed negative effects of salmonella? Because I've heard about this since I was young. It was like, don't eat raw cookie dough, don't eat raw chicken. Yeah.
Well, because they say salmonella is going to give you food poisoning symptoms, for example. So they say you should avoid salmonella. They even call it a disease. So they say avoid salmonella, otherwise you're going to have... they even say you can die, basically, which is complete nonsense. Complete joke. And nothing that you can observe.
So the times I've gotten food poisoning, do you think that's been from
not
raw food, or do you think it's been from lack of exposure to raw food?
People usually say, oh, I went to Thailand and I ate some less cooked chicken and I had food poisoning. I said, what else did you eat? You ate 50 things in that same meal. There was 50 things, MSG, whatever else was in that. That's what actually caused your food poisoning. Is never in my opinion, the raw food.
This was fried chicken from Kentucky.
Right, but
I'm sure there might have been some MSG or something.
Well, fried chicken in Kentucky, McDonald's chicken nuggets probably have 40 ingredients in them. So it's never, the chicken is one ingredient of the 40 that's in those things. And this is always a very interesting thing that I observe when I go on vacation, let's say to a third world country with my friends, Mexico, Bali, Thailand, wherever. I'm still eating raw food when I go on vacation. I go to the butcher, I'll just eat raw chicken, raw meat, whatever. I don't care. For me, it's zero concern. And I'm having no food poisoning, barley belly, whatever. Meanwhile, my friends are eating in restaurants and they're completely destroyed. They're on the toilet for 8 hours taking drugs to try and stop having diarrhea, basically.
Yeah.
And
I went to Bali. I was very sick.
Right. And
you never had barley belly?
Never. Well, I've never been to Bali specifically, but like Mexico, Thailand, whatever. I never had food poisoning in these third world countries, whereas my friends do. And not only that, I'm eating raw food whilst in these countries, and my friends are not. So it's like, what's going on? That's already going to plant a splinter of doubt in someone's mind that maybe Oscar's actually, he's kind of onto something, How could he not be sick in this country? Plus, not only he's just not sick, he's also eating raw meat in a third world country, and he has no problem. What's going on?
Interesting.
Yeah, it's not the raw food that's the problem.
What's something you do in your diet or like lifestyle that is very conspiratorial? It's like there's not a lot of science about it, but you think that it's probably just...
Well, the longevity stuff is interesting, I'm curious. I'm not too attached to it, but I'm certainly curious. I believe that following what I'm doing, I could live to 120. But there's no concrete proof of that. We have the references with tribes and things like that, but there's no one today that's doing that. There is very few people outside of tribes, and even tribes today, I'm eating more tribal than tribes today. So there's very few people that have eaten raw meat. There's very few people today that have eaten raw meat for decades. And so that is an experiment. That's a belief that I have. It's my, you could say, religion, that I believe that I could live to 120 doing this. But let's see, I'm also not too caring about that. So that is, let's say, a belief rather than something that there's lots of evidence today for. Does that make sense? So that would be one. So basically what you're describing is what's something that isn't so concrete, that's more theoretical, that I do. Let's say there's so many things. For example, there's lots of foods that you eat for supposed health reasons, but it's nothing that you're going to observe immediately. It's more of a potential, let's see what happens. For example, there is one of the foods that can remove heavy metals that are stored in your body, in theory, would be something like berries. So fresh, raw berries. So blueberries, for example, and the theory would go that blueberries can help to remove dark metals like mercury, and lighter berries like raspberries can help remove iron, which is like a lighter color metal. But this is a theory. And if I eat blueberries, and you always eat them with raw fats as well, so it helps to detoxify. So if I eat these blueberries, it's not that overnight, even removing heavy metals from the body, it's not something that you instantly notice.
Yeah.
So it's much more a belief-based approach. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Whereas eating raw meat instantly gives me energy. Instantly, I feel it feels good in my stomach. In weeks, my muscles get bigger eating raw meat from the creatine, etc. So that's not so belief-based. That is very observable. But then there's things which are more long-term plays, which are more theoretical or belief-based. And that's not for, you don't have to do those kinds of things. That's more, I'm just curious to see that, Like I said, it is partly or largely a huge experiment what I'm doing, no doubt about it. I would never claim otherwise, right? And it's good to doubt it along the way, and good to be skeptical, and it's good to acknowledge that this is an exploration. But it's fascinating stuff.
I want to ask you, because you just talked about blueberries, so I don't usually do personal stuff on my podcast, but like this is, I have something, they've labeled it like oral allergy syndrome, right?
Okay.
I can't eat fruits without getting like really sick, like coughing and like my lips like swell and stuff. But I remember when I was younger being able to eat fruits. And then I remember drinking a lot of milk. And then I remember like I would like drink milk and like eat strawberries or something. And I remember like eventually it was kind of making me sick. And I started taking like Zyrtec, very common allergy medicine. But do you think like drinking raw milk will likely allow me to eat fruits again?
Well, when the doctor says you can't eat this or you're going to have X, Y, Z symptoms, I would always say, how do you know? Have you verified that?
Yeah. If I ate a strawberry today, like it would make my mouth swell up.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah. Any fruit really, the more acidic.
Have you verified that with organic fruits, for example?
I don't know if I've tried organic fruits.
Right. So immediately, especially in the US, the legal regulations on the chemical sprays and fertilizers and pesticides and fungicides that they use is way more loose than in Europe, for example. So the amount of chemicals that are on US food is significantly higher than you're going to see in European food. So I would say almost to the point where you might have nothing if you eat an organic strawberry in Europe. So I would always want.
So are all the fruits in Europe organic, pretty much?
No, definitely not. But there's more regulations of what we can and can't spray. It's still terrible, the non-organic stuff. But the US is the next level. It's quite absurd, So yeah, I would always want to see it with my eyes that you actually have those symptoms. Yeah. For example, people buy my course and they say, I'm allergic to oysters. And I'm saying, show me. I don't believe you. I just don't believe you. I've never seen anyone allergic to a raw oyster. And people say, no, I have a shellfish allergy. I say, show me that you have a reaction to a raw oyster, one raw oyster, even half an oyster. Never see it. So.
But it's the cooked ones?
Yes. So that's also an important point with allergies. Whenever they do a study, and this is why allergy tests are the biggest load of nonsense on earth, because they do not distinguish a raw versus a cooked food. But of course, if you cook something and make it very difficult to digest, then you're going to have an allergy symptom, which is just a disagreeable reaction to the food.
Yeah.
So
I have less of a reaction if it's frozen or cooked, I've noticed.
Okay. But I would need to see it. It's very interesting stuff. But something like a shellfish allergy, raw shellfish allergy, I'm not sure it exists. But cooked shellfish allergy, people have a bad time doing that. So I would say it could be something similar with the.
I mean, that makes sense. It's like why would we have cooked something that you catch in the ocean?
Well, or just why would people cook? We were saying earlier, right? It tastes better, and warm food is very nice as well. That's a big reason. I forgot to say that, but like food when it's warm is very it's warming if you're in a cold place, for example. Yeah.
Interesting. Dude, we're gonna have to get some fucking strawberries. So, how has this diet changed your physique?
Well,
because you did bodybuilding at one point.
Yeah. So I used to do a lot of bodybuilding. I was trying to be a fitness model, and tried to be very low body fat level to do that. And I was really suffering a lot with that. And it seemed like in the past, whenever I stopped going to the gym, my muscles would disappear very quickly. You hear that, people say that, right? They go on vacation and they say, oh, I lost all my gains, And I think that from eating raw food, to me it seems like your muscle is much denser. Well, firstly, the muscle retains much better. So even if I hardly lift these days, but I'm able to retain most of the muscle mass. And I believe that's because it's much denser muscle. So there was one theory that explained that if you eat a lot of raw meat, it makes the muscle fibers much more dense. So they are less prone to, let's say, vanishing, even with minimal stimulation.
Interesting.
So that's one thing I observed. The ability to retain muscle is much better. But there's, many people ask the question, like if I eat raw food, am I going to be do I look like a god and like Tarzan? And the reality is that no, you don't. Actually, on the flip side, if you drink a lot of raw milk, you can get chubby very quickly and you start to kind of look like a baby because the raw milk is the baby diet, right? So if you start to drink a lot of raw milk, you start to get a lot of fat, especially in the beginning of eating raw food. It's normal that people start to gain a lot of weight.
Really?
So I wouldn't say raw food is not necessarily going to make you look better from a physical muscle standpoint. It can help you build muscle quicker, but like you're not going to eat raw food and suddenly look like the Liver King, On the flip side, you might, if you start to eat a lot of raw milk and stuff like that, you should you can actually gain a lot of undesirable belly fat that people
Interesting.
do.
How do you mitigate that? I mean,
Drink less would be one. It's also acknowledging that gaining some fat is actually beneficial. So when I started to eat raw food, you understand the theory that your body requires fat to detoxify. So you need to gain some weight for your body to to start to dump toxins into the fat. So that's why they do experiments and they say lean meat has very little toxins in it, but the fat is where all the toxins are. So toxins are what's called lipophilic, meaning fat-loving. They're attracted to fat. So toxins go towards fat. So if you have no fat on your body, all those toxins, they have nowhere to go. They're kind of free-flowing, going in your organs, in your brain, in your bone marrow. So when you start to gain weight, it allows the toxins to go into that fat, almost like a protective layer that you have. And that's very beneficial because it allows your body to actually heal itself.
So there's a dark side to having really low body fat.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
What do you think is
terrible.
Optimal?
Well,
like percentage-wise?
Well, what's good and what I did myself, when I started to eat raw food, I actually gained 30 kilos, so 70 pounds. And I went from 65, 66 kilos to over 90 kilos. So yeah, about 70, 80 pounds, which is...
So how many pounds were you total?
So I started at 6 kilos. It's in 67 kilos was my starting weight. And I went up to over 90.
Okay.
So
and 90 kilos, do you know how many pounds that is?
That's over 210 pounds.
Got it.
So okay. I was about 205, 210.
It's like 150 to, or 160 to 210,
exactly.
something
so
like that.
Drastic weight gain, and that's in the span of about 4 months.
What the hell?
Yeah, and I looked, when I gained the weight, it was pure blubber. It was not necessarily the most aesthetic.
Yeah.
But I did that, partly just understanding the theory that it's actually good to gain weight so your body can detoxify, but also it feels good to do it, actually. You feel warm. It was in the winter in Scandinavia at the time, so it was actually, there was kind of that reason to do it. It was also during, partly during coronavirus, so I wasn't exactly super active with girls and things like that. So that's why I did it at the time, and I don't regret that. And that's generally, if someone's very sick, that would be one of the things that they should do. And in patients that try to cure cancer, not my patients, there's other scientists that have experimented with raw food as a means to cure serious illnesses like cancer. They observed that the patients who died were the skinny ones, almost always. Versus, because if you stay skinny, you cannot heal. So that's why if someone does...
So if you're sick, you should gain a lot of
as much weight as possible. So someone skinny and doing chemotherapy is like a death sentence. It's almost guaranteed that they're going to die.
Oh.
I see it all the time. My sister's friend, he died recently. He was a very skinny guy from Mexico, and he did chemotherapy. He's dead within 6 months. And it's like, well, of course, he was like a twig. He's never going to make it. You have to get fat.
Now that I think about it, like maybe this is just personal experience, but I feel like a lot of cancer, leukemia patients are rather thin.
Well, it's kind of is it the cause or it's part of it basically, where they get cancer and then they start to really lose their appetite, and it's a cycle.
So skinnier people are more likely to get sick.
I don't know if there's a study that verifies that. My belief and my theory would say absolutely.
Skinny as opposed to healthy weight.
Healthy weight, 15% body fat, 18% body fat, something like that.
And it's because their body can't fight off the toxins with the fat.
The body has no protective layer on it. So all the toxins that are breathing in, all the jet fuel that burns above our head and comes down, the particles, all the chemicals, the microplastics, it has nowhere to go if you have no fat on your body, except for your organs, your vital organs, largely goes in the brain and in the bone marrow, which is where blood cells are produced. So you're going to have a lot of problems. So
what's a healthy body fat percentage?
Well, my point was, I think if someone was to start this journey of, let's say, experimenting with health and raw foods and detoxing, and was curious about it, it would be a good idea if they wanted to fully do it, or like, let's say, really experiment. They would probably want to gain some weight in the beginning, like I did. Not necessarily 60 pounds, but they would probably want to gain, 20 pounds, 30 pounds of healthy weight. And they can lift at the same time so that they're gaining good muscle to make the most of it. But yeah, that would be a good idea. And then say after a year or so, or 6 months, you might want to start to lose that weight and sit somewhere around 15% body fat, I would say.
15%?
Something like that is probably the healthiest.
That's really interesting because when I think of attractiveness, it's usually evolutionary, right?
Right.
So I think people with less body fat are presumably more attractive, especially men. Like nice jawline, cheekbones. So like, wouldn't the ideal from an evolutionary perspective be under 15%?
Well, that's it. That's in men, right? But if you look at the past, if you look at statues of women, they, what is fertility? It's definitely not the skinny Russian catwalk model. It's the opposite, right? Where she's curvy and she has some plumpness to her, some body fat. So in the past, that was viewed as a symbol of fertility. And that instinctively, to me now at least, that looks healthy when I see a nice plump girl. Not necessarily chubby, but some weight on her. So that was it in the past, and maybe now people have changed their taste buds in women, where they start to value skinniness in society, and people have a lot of body dysmorphia and things like that. But I think in the past, people actually saw women with more body weight as healthier. Then you can go to male statues, and obviously you have like Greek gods and things like that, but they didn't have the same level of toxins that we have today. So I think it's probably. I don't know. I mean, you can ask women today. I think generally they'll say they like bigger guys, not fat ones, but like they just don't like skinny guys in general.
The
majority. There's a reason dad bod is a thing. So I'm not sure exactly there. Like, it's more a question of if I think it's also a preference, right? So what some women are going to like skinny guys, some like fat dudes. But it's more. How to say it? I think what would be most attractive. Actually, another point about sorry, I fucked that up. Another point about attractiveness is that when you eat raw food, you will generally start to have better skin. Not just raw food. When you eat healthier food, right, you tend to have better skin. You tend to tan better as well. That's something that you see today. People, how many times do you hear girls or even guys? They say, "I can't sunbathe. I just burn like this." That's because they lack a lot of the fat in the skin. They also, because they have no natural oils in their skin, also a fat deficiency. So once you start to eat a lot of fat, you're also able to tan better. Most of the time, people would agree that tan people generally look healthier. It's a good sign of health.
Do fatter people get tanner easily?
In theory, a fat person should be able to tan better than a non-fat person. However, the kinds of fat that people eat today isn't healthy fats. It's very unhealthy fat, so that even might make people tan worse, actually. So if you're consuming, let's say, a lot of oil, like cooked oils, seed oils, things of that nature, generally you would think that would make someone, I would think that would make someone tan less well, actually, and more prone to burning, let's say. So
what are your thoughts on tanning? You're mixed race, right?
I'm Spanish, British Spanish.
British Spanish, right? So there's an argument that someone like you could have more sun exposure than someone like me, based on evolutionary differences. Like, it's the reason why you're slightly darker, a lot darker than me, honestly, even that's sad. But what do you think should be like optimal sunlight? Or do you think it depends on?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one, because you kind of think like, well, if you're a native Finn, or a native Scandinavian from the north of Europe, there's only so much sunlight that you have, right? It's an interesting one. It would be hard to say. I'm not sure that is even the best thing. Versus, let's say, a Northern European living in the south of Europe and tanning all year round. It would be hard to say which is actually healthier. What's something interesting is that Finnish people or people in Northern Europe generally have longer lifespans despite having less sun. So that would kind of point to that the sun isn't a huge factor actually in living a long, healthy life in a way.
But for those people, because they're very pale skinned.
Maybe for those people.
There's been arguments that a lot of Africans move to America, African Americans, and they move to colder areas, right? Like you have the UK.
Yeah.
You have the black populace in the UK, in New York, in Chicago perhaps, and that lack of sun exposure could lead to like some forms of depression, anxiety,
Absolutely.
like different health negations.
Well, I think it's true. You might feel like even when I stayed in Eastern Europe for a while, and I've always been attracted to the sun, and I'm like, I don't feel like I belong here, Even when I lived in Scandinavia for a while during the winter, and I was like, this isn't my native land. I can almost feel it. Like I feel like I want the sun a lot more than this, basically, which is interesting. Maybe we do have different requirements. That is quite complicated, and you have to really understand. Have to do a lot of science. Maybe there's a lack of science there at the moment. Because maybe people feel like it might even be racist to point some of those things out, so they don't even do the science. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'd be curious to see more science in that realm to see exactly if those things are true, basically. But I suspect that they won't do it because of the race.
That's interesting.
The racist part of that. So.
Yeah, it's like the whole thing with milk. It's like we can't not give everyone milk,
right?
But like it's like 90% of Asians are allergic to milk. It's it's bad for them. But.
Well, another interesting thing about that is with the sunlight. There was one explorer called Vilmar Stephenson who went to visit the Inuit Eskimos in the early 1900s, and to make observations on their health, on what they were doing in terms of food and things like that. And his observations were that despite the most brutal, tough conditions and minimal sunlight in the north, in the Antarctic, in the North Pole, these people would still live to 100 plus years old, despite brutal conditions and minimal sunlight. And that's because they actually got so much nutrients from the food that they were eating, which was whale blubber, caribou, seal meat, all of that. So it's fascinating that you can really, maybe humans need...
What country is that in?
That was in the North Pole.
North Pole.
Yeah. Or Antarctica, I can't remember.
People lived in Antarctica?
Yeah, it might be in the North Pole. I don't know, the Inuit Eskimos, but wherever they were in the North Pole, in the North, in the toughest conditions, living to 100, 110 years old from eating, raw animal foods and eating so much animal fat, which contains a lot, even vitamin D. So that's where they got, let's say, their nutrients from, as opposed to the sun.
What's the biggest mistake entrepreneurs make when it comes to their health?
Entrepreneurs aren't necessarily that different to anyone else, right? So it would be just mistakes within the diet where you see people getting not understanding that the food is actually the most important thing. And so you see a lot of entrepreneurs, they make mistakes like they don't even, or they start to consume so many supplements because they think that can somehow replicate, let's say, good food.
Do you take any supplements?
No, zero.
Why?
Don't see a need for myself. I put so much effort into the foods that I source, the nutrients that I consume from the food, that there would be really no reason for me to consume the supplements. But people are free to do it if they want to. I think also a lot of supplements is you don't really notice anything. So then you're taking it because it's a belief, but my belief is not that. So there's no reason for me to take it.
Do you think most supplements are placebo?
I think most supplements you will not notice anything positive happening. It's just a belief based that this is good for me, therefore I'm going to take it. But and people take it because they think that they need to, just as a risk mitigation. They think, well, why not just take it? Because they don't understand that there could even be some negative side effects of consuming those supplements.
What are the negative side effects?
I don't want to ruin anyone's business or anything like that. But some people, let's say, some supplements. I won't go into specifics, but like some supplements, the way that they're manufactured is very, they go through a process where they use chemicals in the process. They use even petrochemicals to create a lot of these supplements.
Petrochemicals are like fossil fuel-esque, or what is that?
Well, a petrochemical is a chemical used in the process of making fuel, essentially. And people are consuming that, which are like even carcinogenic. So that's because you have to think, right? Let's say you have a herb like maca root or whatever. And this can be any herb, not just maca, it just came to mind. And for you to go from having this maca root in the ground to you now having this pill with powdered maca, that's a whole process to get there.
Yeah.
And there's chemicals used there. There's heat used in the process to make it not mold, for example. There's all kinds of processing happening. And in that process, you go from something that is quite healthy to something that's not so healthy. So
there's no nootropic or like supplement that you take?
Personally, no. But it's not that I don't prioritize taking things which I think are good for my health. My preference is only the source to get it from food, the source itself, as opposed to an isolated compound or something that's been processed. So I prefer the unprocessed. For example, sometimes I eat thousands of oysters a month, and that's not because I love the taste. By oyster number 1,000, I'm quite sick of them actually. But that is
oysters boost your testosterone, right?
Significantly.
Or they boost your libido.
They boost your libido. They increase the size of your ejaculation significantly. I can verify.
You could verify?
Yeah, because of the mineral content. So that's my supplement. For example, I might eat 3,000 oysters 1 month. In Miami, I was doing that quite a lot.
3,000 oysters?
Yeah, it's crazy.
How much money do you have to make to buy 3,000 oysters?
I spend a lot of money on my health, and that's just my choice.
How much do you think you spend on your health a year?
I don't know. Oh well, it's more, the biggest cost is the food, because that's where I get my nutrients from. Let's say that's my supplements, is the food itself. So I mean, tens of thousands. Like it's the most expensive part of my life, you know. But it doesn't have to be, and that's always, you know, what I do is like a bit freaky and a bit weird, and I'm always experimenting with stuff. For the average person, they don't need to eat thousands of oysters. But for me, it's just what I like to do. I'm kind of curious to see what happens as a result of doing that. So
what are the other results of eating 3,000 oysters in a month?
Well, oysters is a vitality food, right? So it's going to make you have a lot of libido, make you feel very horny. Other than that, it's a theoretical exploration to see, you know, there's one theory that explains that oysters, because of the mineral content, can help to remove heavy metals from the body. Again, there's nothing that you're going to observe immediately. This is more of a long-term thing to do, and see what happens almost. So that's kind of what I'm doing with the oysters. But it's in the short term, energy, libido, size of your loads increases. So yeah.
What's the number one thing you can do to prevent hair loss?
The number one thing would be, if you could only do one thing, well, I'll give you two things. One is the egg shampoo, so washing your hair with raw eggs, because then you're avoiding all chemicals on your scalp if you're using egg shampoo as opposed to, let's say, a chemical shampoo, which people want to use these days.
You think shampoo causes hair loss?
100%. This is the most preposterous thing about the hair loss industry. You know, over the last couple of years, I've really researched everything about the hair loss industry, and it's a complete joke. The companies that own the shampoos, the big five companies, Procter & Gamble, these kinds of companies, they're actively being sued because their shampoos cause hair loss. But what else do these companies own? They own Rogaine and hair loss medication and hair loss shampoos. So they own the thing that's causing the hair loss, but they
own the medicines?
They also own the prescription drugs to sell you the solution to the problem they created. So it's a giant circle jerk that's happening there. And it's amazing to see it, you know, and it's a complete joke. And so what I propose to people and what I do myself is to just step outside of the circle, you know, and stand on your own 2 feet, basically. And
every dentist gives you fluoride toothpaste.
Right. Well,
it says brush with it.
There you go. It's a system that we created. You know, it's a great business model in a way. So from a business standpoint, you could even admire what they're doing. It's very smart. You know, they're owning the whole cycle. But as a consumer, I prefer to not be involved in the hamster wheel. You know.
It's really interesting. What was the other thing for hair loss?
Oh yeah. So I said egg shampoo would be one. That would be something that you can immediately see that your hair is going to feel better.
Egg shampoo.
Yeah. And the next change that you would need to make would probably be, because most people don't, consuming way more meat, to be honest, because the meat has so much protein in it. That's going to help your hair significantly. I had one lady, I had a women's course for hair loss. I have a women's course for hair loss, and she joined the course, and she was a lady from India, and in India, generally, they're vegetarian, or they eat very low meat diets, and she was having severe hair loss. This is a woman, right? So women, less common to have severe hair loss, but she was having it. And I asked her, how much protein do you eat? And she says, I eat some lentils and rice. And like, that doesn't count. Vegetable protein is not a thing.
How are there vegan bodybuilders then?
Well, firstly, that's an interesting one, because a lot of vegan bodybuilders, one, they're not vegan, and I can attest to this. I'm not going to say who it is, but there was one vegan health coach guy who was advertising, get healthy, do the vegan diet, and
Wow.
suggesting that he was doing it. But of course he wasn't. Eating steak on the side. Oh, I'm just experimenting this month. I'm gonna have oysters. So
a lot of vegan bodybuilders
are not
lying.
Essentially, a lot big. Not all of them. There's some that are generally there. A lot of them are lying. Then there's a lot that eat meat by accident, or eat animal products by accident. Oh, I ate out. I didn't realize this had egg in it. Things of that nature. That happens so much, because they're eating in restaurants. Even the food itself can have. This might sound ridiculous, but I believe that some of the insects and even that are getting into the vegan foods actually there's animal protein right there. So that would be an example. Then there's also there is some that genuinely look good, the vegan bodybuilders, no doubt about it, right? When I say vegans, they look terrible after 10 years, that's like 95%. There is a few that can look okay. Maybe they have strong genes. Maybe they have so much, before they were vegan, maybe they had so much nutritional, they stored nutrients in their body, essentially like a penguin or an animal in hibernation, that they still can keep going years later. That's possible. And then there's also the fact that many of them just take steroids, they're enhanced athletes. So that kind of removes the need for the meat, at least in the short term. We'll see how they do in the long term.
Do you eat any insects?
No, I wouldn't do that. Just from a principle of not going to do it, because I don't like where that thing goes of like, oh, we can replace mammal meat with insects. So I wouldn't do it myself. I would try it or something, but for fun. But like, I would never routinely buy that. It's never going to be as nutritious, because as I was describing earlier, if the healthiest thing for humans is the closest thing to that we have inside of us, the further you go from that, the less healthier it is. So like,
why is that the case for humans though? Because cows don't eat cows.
They can.
But why do they eat grass?
Well, they're herbivores. They have a different digestive system.
So only carnivores, they're supposed to eat the things that are most
applies to
similar.
carnivores. That applies to carnivores. So a herbivore has 3 stomachs. It has a completely different digestive system, which can take grass and make it into saturated fat, and take the protein.
How about like
from
birds? They eat insects and like little worms and stuff. They don't eat other birds, do they?
They do.
They do.
Not routinely, but they do. And then it's an interesting exploration of why don't they do that, and why we don't eat other humans, right? Generally, so there could be something there of like not wanting to eat your own. But animals eat other animals all the time. Lions eat other lions.
That's interesting. What were you saying about the story of the vegan bodybuilder?
So yeah, there was this guy I met, and he was a vegetarian guy taking TRT, and he kind of had muscle, but it was so weird, and it was like he just looks like a vegetarian bodybuilder. And even Brian Johnson himself, if I was to try to describe him to my mom, who's never seen him before, I'd say this guy is a vegan bodybuilder, and that's what he looks like. Kind of like a skinny, pale, very unhealthy looking, dry skin bodybuilder, because that's what it does when you do the vegan diet. You're not eating any saturated animal fat, you're not eating any animal protein, and you ended up looking.
I mean, he's even injecting fat in his face to optimize for attractiveness.
That's always funny to see. It's like anything to avoid actually just eating a nice steak, That's what he's going for.
Have you ever dated a vegan?
I've been on dates with vegans, but it usually is one of the biggest turn-off for girls. There's 2 biggest turn-offs. One of them is a vegan, because if she's a vegan, she's going to have a lot of beliefs which are, let's say, misaligned to mine. And she's going to have a lot of brainwashing there that's led her to even being vegan in the first place. Not to say that I can't get along with them anyway, but it's usually not a great starting point, especially since I'm going to probably take them for oysters and sashimi and sushi, which are my favorite foods. Yeah. And they're going to have none of those things, So
you're going to take them on a wild hunt in Africa.
Yeah, exactly. If I want to take them on vacation, we're going to be doing some primal stuff. It's not going to vibe for them. But that said, vegans are often some of the most, or ex-vegans are,
The most dedicated carnivores are ex-vegans.
Yeah, or like that said, oftentimes people that get into raw meat are actually ex-vegans.
This makes sense.
Because they care about food and health, and they think that they're doing the right thing, but they're just completely misinformed. And then they actually find the right thing, which is carnivore and raw carnivore, and then they're very enthusiastic about it. So yeah, it's kind of interesting.
The most dedicated atheists were former hardcore Christians.
Exactly, they're kind of
the most dedicated Christians are former atheists.
Exactly,
makes sense.
You could say.
So you wouldn't date a vegan, and you wouldn't date a doctor.
Yeah. And then the second profession, the thing that I would never date is a doctor, because if they're a doctor, it means that they're so brainwashed with the whole medical, pharmaceutical industry brainwashing that's there, the metaphysics of the pharmaceutical industry, that is completely the opposite of what I actually practice and believe in. So there is so much brainwashing to be done for them to have some similar, let's say, lifestyle as what I have. So it never usually goes too well. If they're a doctor, they're also probably heavily injected with medication, which again is not something that I'm going to be interested in. So it's not usually the best fitting.
You know, I actually dated a vegan. Maybe she was vegetarian, but I took her to a steakhouse for Valentine's Day in Los Angeles, and I thought about this a lot. I was like, if I give her Wagyu and have the waiter give a spiel about it, and it's not me, she might try it so she was vegan because she didn't like seeing animals get hurt. It wasn't a dietary thing. So the waiter comes over and he's like, yeah, these cows have been caressed and massaged and treated perfectly all their lives. And she was really into it. And I got to the point, she tried a bite of the steak and just her face was this is the best thing I've ever had, almost orgasmic.
Well, you say that because it's really funny that you say that, because oftentimes you'll hear stories of ex-vegans or now ex-vegans that they just decide they can't take it anymore and they're going to eat meat because they have such strong cravings. And then they eat some meat, some kind of animal product. And then if they're a man, they will literally have a wet dream that night. There's a famous story of this one ex-vegan on YouTube, and he ate some raw salmon. And he said that he had a wet dream that night. The first time in years that he'd eaten any animal product. So
it's not an instant ejaculation. Okay.
No, it's not you eat it and no, it's not like that. It's it's like that night, And that's actually very funny because
this is common?
This is common, and this is something I forgot to mention earlier. When I was in Africa drinking blood from a wildebeest and a zebra.
I hope you didn't have a wet dream that night.
I had a wet dream that night. And that tells me that it's so good for your health. Because if you have a wet dream, think about what it takes to produce a wet dream.
Yeah, your libido has to be insane.
Libido, hormones. So I drank the blood. 10 hours later, I'm having a wet dream. It's of course it's healthy. It's so obvious. When you have a lot of oysters, it's very common that you will have a wet dream. If you eat 40 oysters, it's not uncommon that you will have a wet dream. It's the minerals.
Fans of the channel, do you guys think Oscar is perhaps a cannibal, not a carnivore? Do you think he's giving signs of being a potential serial killer? I'm questioning this right now, and I'm questioning spending the day with him after this podcast.
Don't fall asleep in the same room, man.
Interesting. How did you get so die-hard about your health? Was there an event?
It was more, well, I had a lot of health problems in the past. I had issues with my digestion. I had very low testosterone measured in blood work. All of the symptoms of low testosterone, low energy. I had no libido. Couldn't really perform in the bedroom. There was a while where I was having issues like that.
I read that you work in your bed a lot. Is that still the case?
Yeah, that's you could say a bad habit because it's not so good for your posture.
Something I do as well.
Yeah, just on the computer. It's my favorite. Since I was 12 years old, I was always doing that on the computer like this. But yeah. So yeah, I had a lot of health problems, low testosterone, digestive issues. And that was the initial interest in, okay, I need to fix my own issues. I was never into medication. And so I was never going to do that path for myself. Yeah. I was always interested in how do I fix this myself. I tried the supplement route, that didn't work, and then I basically started to read about tribes, how they did things, how they lived a very long time, and it was whoa, this is crazy stuff. And no one knows about this. Now it's there's more people that are aware of this. Everyone's starting to eat loads of meat sales through the roof. When I started, no one was talking about this stuff. So few people.
Yeah.
When I started posting myself eating raw eggs on internet, no one was posting themselves eating raw eggs except for the freaks. But I was the first cool guy to post myself eating raw eggs, and I've kind of made it cool amongst entrepreneurs to do that now. What do
you think of Liver King?
Liver King, say he got a lot of things right, but I think there was no substance to his message, so it was quite shallow. And there's only so many times that you can be a meme. It's going to die out eventually, So he had the meme excitement at the beginning, but he didn't have the substance to follow, and that's why he kind of died out. Who even follows the Liver King anymore? With respect, of course. I really like him, and I would love to meet him one day. But now it's there was no substance to it. It was a big wave of excitement, and then it died down.
Yeah, it didn't do much teaching. It feels like it was just a lot of show.
Well, that's the substance, right? The substance is explaining what you're doing, some science behind it, making things making things refreshing. So
I think if Liver King went the Brian Johnson route, he might have had more longevity.
Well, it's more interesting than Brian Johnson. In a way, it has more substance to it and more mystery. So yeah, I think it could have been. Could have been.
So you talk a lot about primal things. In your relationships, do you burp in front of your girlfriends?
No, and one of the...
Wait, do you fart in front of your girlfriend?
No, because when you eat, let's say a carnivore diet, or even better, the raw carnivore diet, there is no gas. You have no gas in your body. So you do not have any, you do not fart, you hardly burp, for example.
When's the last time you farted?
I don't even remember. Like, I'm not even joking.
It's been years?
It feels like it's been years. I'm not even joking.
Huh.
Like, it's when you eat these foods, they don't produce any gas in your body. So you do not have, the gas in your stomach, you do not burp, you do not fart. Versus, let's say, a vegan, I can guarantee you, any vegan, let's say Brian Johnson, I guarantee you that guy has so much gas, it's disgusting. Like, it would be horrible to be around him for that reason. So yeah, that's one of the main benefits that I noticed, and one of the things people notice when they do this.
So farting isn't natural.
Well, it's. I mean, it's.
Don't animals?
Does a lion fart? Probably not. Does a carnivore fart? I don't think so.
Cows do.
Cows do, but they're herbivores. They eat tons of grass, right? And when we try to mimic the herbivore diet, which is a vegan diet, then suddenly people start to get all this gas, and they assume that it's normal, but it's not.
Interesting. What do you think of pheromones?
I think that pheromones could be real if, like, let's say the original humans, before we were modernized and before we started to use perfumes, I think pheromones there could be real. But I think now we are so far away from the original state of human.
Do you try to smell your women to make sure you're a good fit?
No, I think humans are so far away from that any kind of natural smell usually doesn't smell good, to be honest. So the neutral smells like neutral, so there's nothing to complain about. But if they smell anything, usually it's not good, to be honest. But the girls have told me that they like my smell. Like, I've had that so many times. I'm sure other guys, even on eating crappy food, have had the same thing. So I think maybe girls have that more. I don't know. But I don't get I'm attracted to the smell of a woman, Like, that's not my thing. But
I've been unattracted to the smell.
Usually it's only that.
And I've been indifferent about the smell, but I've never been attracted.
Right,
but I have heard a lot of girls say that.
Girls have said it. That's true, actually. Yeah. So maybe it's a girl thing. It's not a dude thing so much. In a way, you kind of don't want your woman to smell.
Do you recommend any, as far as health advice goes, is there anything that's different for men than it is for women?
That would be a myth, to be honest with you. Like, the human diet is the same for the humans, regardless of male or woman. So I don't think so. I think any differences that people distinguish between man and woman diet is only to sell you a product, a woman-specific supplement, a woman-specific whatever,
Yeah.
I think there is really little to no difference, only in the quantity.
Maybe you know the history better. I just think of, if we're speaking nomadically, perhaps, like when men would go out and hunt and women would stay at home with the children and prepare the meals eventually, you would think that women would perhaps be eating different things than men would, and men wouldn't be eating for extended periods of time.
Well, that's different though, the fasting, isn't it? So I think, what do we see when we look at tribes today? We see that they feed, when a woman is pregnant, tribes will feed the woman the organ meats, for example, liver. So they know this instinctively. They don't know it with science and experiments. They know it with their natural instincts, that these foods are the most nutritious, and somehow that is good for a woman who is in the process of giving birth to a baby. So instinctively, they know that these foods are the most nutritious. So I think that they would partition it out quite evenly amongst the children, women, and the men. I don't think that women would necessarily eat too much differently from the man, to be honest. That's my assumption when I go to the tribes.
Do you drink breast milk?
I would, but it's not. I don't have a pregnant girlfriend right now, so I haven't.
No one's letting you some.
Well, I did in the past, as most guys did, right? They drink their mother's breast milk.
That's
so
true.
That's our first exposure to raw milk. What's interesting is that for some people is the last time in their whole life that they drink not just raw milk, but any kind of raw fats, because breast milk is at least 20% fat. So that is the last time for so many humans that they ever eat raw fats, is the last breast milk that they take. Yeah. But the raw fat is the single most important thing for health, so it's fascinating. And that's also why when people eat some raw cream or drink raw milk as an adult, they're like, holy shit, this is good. You know, I've introduced girls to raw milk, girls that I've dated in the past, and like they've messaged me like a few days later, like, I'm really craving that raw milk. You know, same with people in my program when they try raw milk for the first time. So many times they say, oh, I was really craving that raw milk. Even the same with raw eggs, which have a lot of raw fat in the egg yolk. People will try a raw egg, and they say, that's fucking disgusting, but my instincts are telling me to eat more. And that is the primal craving that you have there. Your brain saying, give me the raw fats. Like that is the first time in decades I've had this thing, which is the most important thing for human health.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating. The brain just craves raw fat more than anything. That's also, I was kind of saying this earlier, but that's also why the vegans are so obsessed with creamy foods. Anything that simulates raw fat, vegans go crazy.
Yeah.
They'll make whole YouTube channels around nice cream, making nice cream. Anything that simulates raw fat in the mouth, vegans are obsessed with, nut butters. Even humans too, but vegans, it's the most funny because they're just denying themselves the thing that they most want. And everything they eat is just to replicate the animal fat texture. It's really funny. But all they need to do is actually just drink some raw milk, drink some raw cream, and they're going to be good, you know?
What's been the craziest thing you've heard of, like, be fixed from your diet?
Well, you hear stories, not necessarily people I've met before, but stories of people that had severe issues like cancer. You know, you even had a friend you said that had cancer and didn't do chemotherapy, and now he's fine, right? So that's pretty crazy. In terms of a story that I was involved with or witnessed with my own eyes, I had one client, and he came to me, and he was like 240 pounds, 45, 46 years old, and he was like on diabetes medication, taking diabetes medication, not feeling good, low testosterone measured in blood work, just really overweight, couldn't lose the weight either. That's often a symptom of being diabetic. And he said, I'll pay you for your coaching, you know, it's a significant amount of money. And he said, just help me get in shape. And I said, well, what medications are you taking? That's one of the questions I always ask. And I told him, okay, we can stop that. And we're going to fix your diabetes without this medication. Now,
You told him to stop taking his diabetes?
Well, I'm not. It's not medical advice. I said, if upon my recommendation, if I was you, I would do this, but you can do whatever you want. Obviously, I have to frame it as that. It's not medical advice. And he said, okay, I'll stop and see what happens. And I had read that once upon a time, this guy called Hippocrates. I don't know if you heard of Hippocrates.
Yeah, Hippocrates.
Yeah, right. The guy from the Greek ages, the first kind of doctor, you can say, philosopher doctor. He was curing Greeks of diabetes on a diet of only raw milk fasting, you can call it. And I'd read this, and I'd never done it with a real person, or I never recommended or told someone to do it before. But of course, I read this online, and I have a guy overweight, diabetic. I've done milk fasting before, where you just drink milk for 1 to 7 days. I've done it myself. Done it with other people when they want to lose weight. It's a very effective way to lose weight because you just drink 2 quarts of milk, 1,600 calories. You're going to lose a lot of weight, and you have good nutrients.
So you only drank milk for 7 days?
I've done that before.
What's the longest?
That was about the longest. 6-7 days, yeah, it's crazy. So anyway, so I have this diabetic guy, he's asking me, what could I do? And I said, well, I've never seen anyone do this before, but I read about it from Hippocrates that he would cure diabetes just with raw milk. So I said, all right, let's try this. And he was like, I'm desperate, so I'll do anything. Yeah. So for the next at least 60 days, it might have been 90, but it was at least 60. For the next 60 days, he proceeded to consume a diet, 90%, sometimes, went on the restaurant, whatever, but 90% was raw milk, raw eggs, and honey. Raw honey. That's all he did, raw milkshakes, that's what it is. You blend eggs with honey and milk. It's a milkshake, tastes like vanilla ice cream. He just did this, 90% of what he ate for literally over 2 months was a raw milkshake. Never took medication again, blood sugar stable. He lost 40 pounds. He was 190 pounds. He even went down to 170. And it's been over a year now. This was an old client. I messaged him like literally 3 weeks ago. I said, oh, how you still doing with the milkshakes? Are you sticking with it? He's like, every day, man. I was like, thank you so much. You really changed my fucking life. And that's like one of the stories I'm most proud of because he was taking so many medication. Yeah. And so he was taking millions of supplements. And I just said, let's try this Hippocrates thing.
That's fucking wild, actually. Oh my god.
Yeah.
Was that type 1 or type 2? I'm guessing type 2.
Yeah, type 2. But this was a year ago, and he's still doing great today. He went from 230, 240 pounds. Now he's like at 170. I'm telling you, he was so swollen in his face. The jaw gains. I'll maybe ask him if I can use a picture in this clip. The jaw gains that he got were crazy. It's like he looks like a new man, like complete life change, you know. And it's one of my favorite stories, purely because the truth is, it was an experiment for me also to recommend someone, or to propose at least, that they can do whatever they want, that they can, let's try the Hippocrates thing. You know, I read about this thing and I was like, let's see, you know.
The Hippocrates milk method.
It's literally that, the milk fasting, and it's like, it's crazy, you know. It's fucking crazy. So,
what do you think of fasting?
The fasting's not such a good idea because of the amount of toxins that we have in our environment. You need nutrients to deal with the toxins. It's nothing else that deals with them. So, I'd say it's not a good idea to do it, at least not for very long. You know?
So your body can't detoxify itself.
You need nutrients for any function in the body. So the only way you get nutrients is from food.
What do you think about ice bath, sauna, red light therapy, all this stuff entrepreneurs
all of that stuff can produce, like, let's say ice baths. Ice baths produce a lot of hormones that makes you feel good, right? But that's almost like it's like an overstimulation. Whereas what I prefer to do is none of those aggressive stimulation things and just have a much more nice balanced homeostasis, you know? So it's not the best idea. Then there's also some arguments like...
Would you compare it to coffee? It's almost like you're putting yourself in a adrenaline-induced state, you know?
What, with coffee? With
like an ice bath.
Right, yeah,
like
I mean, it is comparable, right? It's going to produce so many stress hormones going in this cold plunge because your body thinks that it's about to die. So
that's really what it is, if you think about it. Like, I feel the same when it's sauna. It's like my heart's beating fast. And
right, it's almost, with the sauna, you're raising the temperature, so you're almost inducing a fever. That's good, the sweating is good in the sauna, but what happens to most people is that they're also burning their hair. So actually saunas can also cause a lot of hair loss without people don't realizing the hair is essentially on fire and they're sitting in the sauna and they're wondering why the hair falls out.
Saunas cause hair loss.
They can cause hair loss, for sure.
I did not know that.
There's a lot of bald people here.
Yeah, for sure.
We're filming in Finland right now. And apparently there's a lot of bald people here. But yeah, the sweating stuff, same with meditation, man. Like, I think it's really just, we're simulating exercise without doing exercise. Like, meditation works because you're breathing a lot and like you're releasing a lot of oxygen, getting a lot of oxygen in. I do meditation. I just see it as a more chill form of exercise. Same with the sauna. It's like sweating is probably good for you. Breathing is probably good for you, but you could do both those things if you go run.
So you do a lot of sauna?
Not a lot of sauna. I do a lot of
steam.
I mean, I guess I do a lot of hot tub. Yeah, so sauna basically.
The thing is, because if someone has allergies, one of the worst things they can do is go in the sauna.
Really?
Because the sauna, it kills the mucous membranes, and you need that mucus, which is actually fat, to deal with the toxins that cause allergy symptoms. So it's so common that someone came to me with allergy problems, and I asked them, how often do you go in the sauna? Iman Gadji, for example, I met him in person, and he told me, I have severe allergies, I've tried all the bee pollen, I've tried everything. But what's Iman Gadji known for, right? What does he talk about? How much he loves the sauna.
Yeah.
And I told him, I said, you need to know, if you want to actually fix your allergies, take a break from the sauna for 3 months, drink a bunch of raw milk, raw
So do you
eggs.
sauna?
No.
Ever?
No. Because I mean, I like the sweating, but I know that it's not good for other reasons. Like it destroys your mucus. So
how important is like working out? Like, do you do lifting weights? Do you do cardio?
I mean, I do stuff just for aesthetic reasons, you know, and that's it. But outside of that, I don't think it's super beneficial to exercise too much. In terms of like, if the goal is just to live a long life, don't think exercise is necessary. Even maybe one of the reasons women live on average longer than men is because they exercise a lot less, right? It seems like the more almost stationary the person is, the less stress they endure, the longer that they might live. So based on longevity goals, but that's not my goal. But if that was your goal, I don't think exercise is necessary to live to 120 years old.
Yeah, I don't know a lot of professional athletes that have lived long.
Right, and marathon runners are some of the worst looking people you can get.
Huh.
It's funny, I go on dates with girls sometimes. Well, recently I've been pretty active. And when the girl, let's say, my range is like 18 to 21, and let's say I go on a date with a 21-year-old, and she looks like she's 24, 25. I know, before I've even asked her, I know she does like long distance running. And I say, so do you like exercise? Like, what do you do? She's like, I run 20 kilometers like 10 times a week or whatever. And I'm just like, I can tell. You can see it visibly aging. Runners, long distance runners, they look terrible most of the time, especially over years.
Yeah.
So I think the running, long distance cardio, I think it really ages you, and that's very visible in people that do it a lot.
Cardio's bad for aging.
Literally.
Don't do cardio.
You always summarize the clip as like the most ridiculous part,
Another reason to not do cardio.
Yeah.
This can be about food. It can be about you. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
That's a big question. I'd say it's definitely some kind of mindset advice. I guess recently I've been having an experience where I never understood meditation before in the past. I always tried to meditate. I felt like it never worked for me. I was like, I could never get into it. You know, I'm sure many people can relate to that. And it never really worked for me until recently. I started to meditate, and then I started to really see like the meaning of self-contained and self-confidence, basically, and what that actually means. And so I started to meditate recently, and I found this specific style of meditation that really worked for me. And since I started doing this meditation, I'm not even joking, I had girls, like, just the amount of self-respect that I had from girls just went through the roof, like insane. Like, girls would start to like apologize to me all the time. It was really crazy. This started to happen in the last like 2-3 months.
Girls would apologize to you.
Yeah, like say if they misbehaved. And they just started to respect me so much more, basically. And it's because the meditation basically allowed me to somehow start being more self-contained and even respecting myself, basically, and understanding, this is the advice, that it's, in a way, you do not need anyone, basically. And you have all the tools that you need in your mind, basically. And that's kind of what I discovered in the last few weeks, actually. That's kind of why it's fresh in my mind. Through the meditation, basically, that you have everything that you need in your mind, basically. And once you see that, things started to change a lot in my life. So it's been really crazy to understand that. And just to, the key word is like self-contained, and not to require you don't really need other people. Obviously you do if you want to have babies and da-da-da. But really, you're fine in your mind, basically. Just you and your mind is okay. And
you don't need anyone.
Right, in a way. Not in like a kind of depressing way, but in a way of like, you have all the tools that you need in your mind, basically, to all the answers. It's all here, basically. And I'm really understanding that through meditation, game changer.
What's the worst piece of advice you've ever received?
The worst piece of advice could also be the best piece of advice, because it's going to teach you what is the worst in a way. So you can always look at something in a positive way. Let's see, the worst advice. I guess the worst advice, not to give a specific example, but in general, taking advice from people that don't necessarily have what you want. It's so important, and I've made so many mistakes with that.
Every time I ask this question, I ask it on all the podcasts.
Yeah.
That's
the answer?
My answer that I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
It's just any advice from the person, like, you should never take advice from someone who doesn't have what you want.
Right.
It's like, what credibility do they really have?
Right. But it's important to know that it's not only about credibility there, because the smartest people in the world, in my experience, are not business people, actually. And they're not wealthy people. They're the scientists. They're the Steve Wozniak type of person, not Steve Jobs. So you might think that this person, he doesn't have what I want in terms of, like, he's not a billionaire, so why should I listen to him? But he has actually the mental stability that you really want. So it's important to distinguish what exactly you're actually wanting. Because most people, what they actually want is, like, you can say peace or happiness or stability in their mind. And it's not necessarily billionaires that have that. So it's important to understand what you really want, and that it doesn't necessarily have to be about money.
You think the richest people aren't the smartest people?
Definitely not. Because the smart, well, it depends what you mean by smart. They're very smart.
If you look at IQ, for example, and tie it to income, sure, IQ, as it goes up, the income goes up.
Right.
But it is definitely not one-to-one.
Right.
All multimillionaires do not have high incomes. I think there's actually like some type of curve where, like, the lower IQ people tend to make more money, and then the people in the middle make an average amount, and then the people at the high end make a large amount. And that's because the lower people are more likely to execute on things without questioning it.
The
people in the middle will question it, but they don't execute. And then the people at the top, they're like the Zuckerbergs.
Well, it's basically, it depends what you mean by intelligent, because you could have someone that's business savvy and they're very intelligent in business, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not the people that are creating theories and really understanding mechanisms really, really well. So those people, think of like a true scientist, he almost cannot be involved in money making, because then it taints the theory itself. And the smartest people should be those that are just involved in the theory, like a Steve Wozniak, who created Apple, and then Steve Jobs is the business genius, and then he takes a nerd like Steve Wozniak and then makes it into a product that we all have in our pockets. So they're two different people, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, and they're actually complementary to each other, but they cannot do each other's job. So both of them are geniuses, but one is a scientist genius and one is a business genius.
Where do you fit into this?
I'm definitely on the business side of the spectrum, for sure.
Yeah.
And
you're well-read, but not necessarily a scientist who wants to study it.
Yeah.
You just want to help people.
I would, like, of course, it's more, because if Steve Jobs didn't exist, no one would know who Steve Wozniak is. Mm-hmm. So it takes the Steve Jobs, and I would say I'm more of a Steve Jobs than a Steve Wozniak.
Yeah.
It takes Steve Jobs for anyone to ever hear this guy's ideas, basically.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I see what I'm doing, right? And Steve Jobs has to take the science, and he still can understand it, and he can still be well versed in it, but it's his interest is in taking the idea and getting it out there, basically, and making it into a product that people can use, basically. So that's where there's those two kinds of people, and you can definitely be well read and studied, and you'll be more like that person, but you definitely have a nature of being one of the two people. And business people are Steve Jobs; they're not Steve Wozniak. So it takes you pair the two together. That's when you have the ultimate thing.
So Oscar, as a business guy, you spend a lot of money on your business education, not college or university as you call it in the UK, uni, but you've also spent a lot of money on your health. But in the process of spending money on your education, you've networked with some really interesting individuals. I think we were talking earlier and you said that you knew Luke Belmar, Iman Ghazi, you'd even met the Tate brothers, right?
Yeah.
Did you meet Luke Belmar? Or was that?
Yeah, I met Luke Belmar several times.
So you've met all those people I just mentioned?
All those ones.
And I have to ask, who is the most impressive person you've met?
Honestly, like I can't think of one person, to be honest with you. Like it's more, I don't know. I mean, it's more like who is the smartest people and then seeing them, you know what I mean? Like I'm not sure exactly, I'm not sure.
Who's the person you spoke with and you're like, this guy's smart?
I'd say it's even none of the people that you see online, you know, because it's even what I was saying, like the smartest people, they're not necessarily the ones that want to be in the limelight all the time, and they don't want to be the guru, you know, they're just actually doing the thing itself.
Do you have mentors?
I work with Ty, for example, and I have like one friend who is my Steve Wozniak, let's say, and he's like my guy, you know, he's like I'm Steve Jobs and he's my Steve Wozniak, basically. So he's like my best friend, and he's the smartest guy I've ever met. So he's the most impressive. Yeah, but no one knows who he is. That's why I didn't say it. But yeah, my friend, he's like he's a genius friend that I have. Basically, like you can.
What's impressive about him?
Well, do you know who Carl Jung is?
Yeah.
The psychologist is like Carl Jung today, basically. So imagine your best friend is Carl Jung, and you talk to him every day. Like it's the next level, you know. So this is a good friend of mine. He also sometimes talks to some of my clients, but he's the smartest person I've ever met.
Do you have any stories about him that you were like?
It's hard to say, you know. Like to be honest, I'm not sure. Just it's me. I don't know. I'm not sure. Basically, I can't think of something, to be honest. So
let me ask you something more specific. What is no shipping?
Well, I'm not an expert in no shipping. I've just heard of this idea that people do.
You said that in a way that you actually do it. He does not do it.
No, I definitely don't do no shipping. Yeah. I just heard of this ridiculous idea that people basically, it's you know, some people say all money making is somewhat of a scam in a way. And there's obviously a spectrum to directly stealing someone at gunpoint their stuff. And then, you know, there is the spectrum, because money is about taking money from someone else. In order to make money, you have to take it from someone, right? And you can say you provide value, but ultimately, you're taking money from someone. And that's okay. But there is a spectrum of how you take that money. And I guess on one side, you have the direct scam of like killing someone for their money.
Yeah.
And on the other side, you have providing an insane service and doing many things in return for the money. And so you have that spectrum, and you see many people that they get attracted to what's the like scammier ways of making money, because in a way it's more direct, and the thing that we all value is money. So you might see people doing crypto scams. That's kind of quite far along the scam spectrum. Basically, that's pretty close to a direct scam. Yeah. You see people doing credit card cloning, whatever it is. These are all kinds of scams. And then you get some people that do e-commerce scams, and there's something called no-ship drop shipping, where you essentially create a store. It looks like a real store. You create the ads. It's a real product. Customer gets excited. Oh, I want to buy this product. And they put in their credit card details, and the product, it just never ships. You never ship anything out. you just scam them, and then you probably need to, after a couple of weeks or so, close the website down because you're getting tons of chargebacks where people say, hey, calling the bank and saying, hey, my product's never come, can I charge back the credit card? But if there's many shady things that people do there too.
Isn't there an even worse version of no shipping?
Well, then you get no ship drop shipping, but you also rebill the credit card. So this can be for anyone that is buying stuff on the internet, especially if it's like some kind of gimmicky Chinese product from made in China plastic, that you have to be very careful in the checkout for the terms and conditions that you're accepting, because most people accept the terms and conditions without reading it. Frankly, I've never read the terms and conditions.
Yeah.
And Elon Musk says the same thing. No one reads the terms and conditions. And if you click this box to say, I accept the terms and conditions, you could be signing up to any kind of agreement. And so there's some people which are, let's say, scammy people that want to just take people's money without any value. Then they will actually agree, they will put in the terms and conditions that essentially you can be rebilled any amount at any time.
So you buy a product,
Yeah.
you don't get it, and then you get billed for it the next month, and the next month, and
Right.
the next month.
Yeah,
Can
yeah.
you cancel?
Well, I think no ship drop shipping, it can be difficult to cancel because there's even some of people's favorite gurus have actually done this. I don't want to say any names, but there are people that are known to do this where you will put Netflix as in the billing.
Wow.
So you cannot see what the product is, and you're just getting charged once a month for Netflix for the rest of your life, and you have no idea what's going on.
Or like some type of insurance, perhaps.
Amazon Prime, Netflix, and suddenly these e-commerce companies, they might have 1 million customers, and you can charge them all $7 a month for Amazon Prime or Netflix. Suddenly you're making $7 million a month rebill, and it's quite nice.
So the store gets shut down, but they continue charging everyone that put in
That's
their
what I
cards.
believe they do.
And then they do a new store.
They do new stores. They have millions of different processors, payment processors, and the scam just keeps going like that until maybe one day they get caught. But let's see.
Do you think this is a lot of the guys in Miami flexing yachts?
I think there's a significant amount of people in the US that do it.
Is it big in Dubai?
Probably. And no one I ever knew did it in Dubai, but I met people that have done that in the US for sure.
Interesting. Yeah, there's a lot of ways to make money. It just depends on
how
much value you want to provide in
Exactly.
return. So what do you think about courses, mastermind groups? You sell a course, you're probably biased, but you might not be at the same time.
Well,
do you think a lot of those are scams?
Well, here's the thing that happens. Most entrepreneurs, we are hype men. And we are very good at getting excited about an idea.
Yeah.
So that's what marketing is. It's creating excitement and almost pushing people to buy a product, from saying this is an opportunity, seize this opportunity, and making something sexy and cool.
Yeah.
And so people buy the product, but the substance, the meat of the product, it's not there, because the entrepreneur like myself, Ayman Gadzi, he had some situations I can talk about. Other people, Luke Belmar, king of hype. But then you have to ask yourself, is the substance there behind the hype? Because marketing is the sexy excitement to get people in, but the real value is in the product. And if you're very focused on making things sexy and exciting, you don't really care about the details so much. And so that's where the product sometimes doesn't match people's selling abilities of it. You see what I mean?
So don't buy a course from a good marketer, perhaps.
Well,
unless it's a marketing course.
Drop your expectations, basically, and don't expect too much from someone that's a genius marketer, because if they're so good at making something sexy and cool, they might not have the substance to back it up.
It might be within their incentive structure to focus on the marketing aspect of their business and to not necessarily focus on the product itself.
This is why you need two forces always. You need Steve Jobs, who is the sexy, cool marketer, and you need Steve Wozniak, who makes the substantial product. And Steve Wozniak is terrible at selling.
Yeah.
But he's a genius programmer, product designer, theorist, scientist. Steve Jobs is not a good scientist, programmer, whatever, but he's amazing at selling and getting people excited about an idea. So you always need both. And most entrepreneurs are just Steve Jobs, and they are not very wholesome. They do not have their Steve Wozniak to create the products. So you need both, basically. And most entrepreneurs don't have both, and they are not capable of both by themselves. So they have all the hype, but no substance.
But it's possible, too, that you can become so famous that you attract the best talent. Like Tate's courses now, pretty good.
Tate is wholesome. That's the thing. Tate has his Steve Wozniak. actually. I think Luke Beltmar is also a good example, right? He is a king, a master hype man, you know, and he is amazing at that. But he needs people to create the substance of the courses because he is so good at hyping people in that's all that he should do is just get people in. And then you need the Steve Wozniak inside to actually do the work, the details and create the product.
It's very unlikely that people have multiple skills and they're amazing at all of them.
You can't be amazing at both.
It's like people really buy a course because they want to be taught the thing by that person. Right. That's why you buy a course. Like if you buy your course, it's like, sure, I could read about it on Wikipedia, but it's also like, I want to hear how you explain it because I'm interested in your marketing. But that doesn't necessarily mean you have the best information.
Right. You need both of those people there.
But talking about beefing up your entrepreneurial journey, my friend Travis, who we just had on the podcast, he's one of the few self-made millionaires I've met around my age that actually didn't come from wealth. A lot of these guys, daddy had money, mommy had money. That's fine, but like it just loses some credibility when you're making content about it because most people don't have money, most people want to get rich. You're not in the same headspace as them. You had your dad as a mentor, learned everything. What did your parents do?
My parents were not business people in the slightest. They were hippie, middle-class hippies, I'd say. That's my parents. They're more closer to Steve Wozniak than Steve Jobs, let's say that. So they were more interested in... my dad's a writer, so he's an author of English language textbooks because he's very concerned with the theory of English language. And he does not care about making money or anything like that.
But he's a smart guy.
But he's very smart. So he's like Steve Wozniak. So about English language, that's his thing that he committed his life to, is understanding English language and knowing all the rules of English language and things like that.
How about your mom?
My mom is almost like a yoga teacher. She does something specific called Qigong. So she's a Qigong teacher. So is
that like energy work?
Essentially, yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. But it's nothing that ever interests me personally. I found it's too abstract, and it was not. There's no science to it, you know, and I just wasn't. Maybe some also issues with my mom, but I never particularly liked it. But it works for some people.
How about grandparents? Do you have anyone wealthy in the family?
No one. My dad did okay because he had his Steve Jobs to help him monetize his English language theory stuff, but my parents were middle class, you know, nothing.
So where do you get it from?
I think it's personality type, actually. I think that's all it is, you know. And I think some people are born with the mind that they want to make a lot of money and attracted to money and even the valuing of money. And then some people aren't, basically. And I was the only one in my family that was born with this thing. You know, my parents always used to say, "Why do you like money so much?" You know, and why do you like material stuff? My parents don't know what Gucci is, and I'm like 15 buying Gucci stuff or whatever. And
I asked my dad to name a designer brand, and he said Tommy Hilfiger.
My dad would be the same, so it's kind of cool. And somehow I had a different personality, I guess.
Do you have any siblings?
Yeah, I have three siblings.
Are any of them entrepreneurial?
No, not at all.
Interesting.
Zero. Like my family's not a money-making family. But I was wired differently. I was always attracted to money.
So you didn't have anyone in your family successful?
No, I had there's no businessy people in my family. Zero. Zero.
So you would probably call yourself self-made?
Yeah, but it's not like, my parents weren't broke, so I was always comfortable, you know?
Yeah.
So I can't say I was a broke guy. Now I'm not. It wasn't.
I mean, the people I've met, like, I'm just, like, my standards at this point are just, wasn't rich growing up, you know? Like, your dad didn't make millions of dollars.
Yeah.
Because that seems to be the only successful people I meet, honestly.
Really?
Especially our age, you know?
Yeah.
It's very hard to be successful in your 20s.
Sure. Yeah, no, my dad wasn't super wealthy or anything like that, and they were not businessy at all, which is a blessing and a curse in a way, because if they were businessy, maybe I would have made more money faster, which would have been in a way cool. But in a way, they gave me something else in return. You know, my parents are very party people and very good group with friends and good mood and having a good time and playing lots of sports and stuff like that. So I got that instead, basically, which was nice.
I guess the last question is, what's the thing that you don't teach people online? Or what's the thing you don't teach people because it's too taboo? I asked this question before, but you've said a lot of things like drinking blood and eating the fetuses of goats or sheep that would make me think that you're fine with teaching whatever you think. But is there something that's like you don't tell people because it's too weird?
Well, there's lots of health stuff, like even eating raw chicken.
Give me something else. I want something. I want the weirdest thing. You said eat shit, drink blood on this podcast. Like, there has to be something weird.
Well, I mean, eating shit, drinking blood, and raw chicken, they're like 10 out of 10 freaky, you know?
Eating shit, drinking blood, raw chicken. That sounds like a crazy night.
Yeah, that's. I mean, I like most of those things quite frequently, except for the eating shit part. But yeah, I think those things would be right up there with things that I would not necessarily tell people to do. They have to find it out by themselves.
So if you buy your course, you don't get anything about drinking blood?
Definitely no. That's like so far along the freaky spectrum that I don't tell anyone about that, unless they really ask me about it.
How about, do you drink your own piss?
Yeah. I have a lot. I experimented with it for a while. I put, this is kind of funny actually. There's actually one thing I forgot. It's pretty funny. But basically, I only told someone this, there's only one person I told and I was really drunk. But basically, I started to read about stem cells. And one of the places that humans produce stem cells is actually in the semen. And I started to read that if you put stem cells on your skin, it can have a lot of benefits. So I have in the past, like...
Where did you rub your semen?
Like, you know, so just for my own curiosity, you know, like if I have sex with a girl or something, and I just like, just put semen on your face, you know, because like, there has a lot of stem cells in it.
You didn't put it on her face, you put it on your face.
For sure, yeah. It's like skincare, you know? And I have done that before, but more as a joke, you know, but it's been done.
How many times have you done it?
2 or 3.
I think it stops being a joke after one.
No, like, I'm curious.
Did you see any benefits?
No, it's not, but it's not instant. It's more like an exploration, right? And exploring human fluids and removing the disgust that we have around them. And that's kind of what it is. But that's very freaky to me. I don't even know if I want to say that. But there you go. So, I mean, that's been done.
And you drink your own piss too?
Sometimes. But
what's the benefits of that? Because actually, I've met a guy who does this.
Yeah, I've experimented with it before. More than, the reason I thought of the semen on the face, because more than drinking the piss, I like put it topically on my face sometimes. As like skincare. I'm very curious, I'm kind of intrigued about it. It's also me just like experimenting with not being disgusted at human fluids, which is kind of a weird journey. But sometimes I like, let's say, like obviously not if I'm going on a date or if I'm with a girlfriend or whatever. If I'm just sitting at home and, you know, I'm just working all day and I just take a piss, I just like put it on my face, you know, and I'm just like, see what happens. I'm kind of curious. Like,
how often do you do that?
Like quite a lot, actually.
Do you have piss on your face right now?
No. Just when I'm working at home, you know, because I see it. Here's the thing. Like, say if I'm working 8 hours at my desk, and I'm not going out that night, and I'm just like, that for me is an opportunity to do some like weird skincare. So I can give you an example. Like I put like raw butter on my face all the time.
Raw butter.
Like raw unpasteurized butter, and it doesn't smell nice, but it's very good for your skin. It makes your skin really soft. So you have to be kind of strategic about when you do it, because I cannot do that if I'm going out that evening, because it's very greasy. It might take a day to wash off. So if I know I'm just going to be working like monk mode or whatever for a day, that for me is like an opportunity to put some crazy, weird, smelly shit on my face. Not shit literally, but like anything that's...
Sometimes.
You could do it. Anything that smells weird and is weird and is freaky and it's messy, I'm only going to do that, put it on my face when there's an opportunity to do it. Because there's not that many chances where I'm not going to meet someone in the evening or go out the next day or whatever. So say if I'm in a monk mode, that is like prime time to put something weird on my face. Because there's like, I'm
What's the weirdest thing you put on your face?
Definitely semen. My own semen on my face. Done that several times.
I'm glad to hear it's your own.
Because it has stem cells in it. So I was just curious to see what happened. But of course nothing happens and it's completely fine and it's kind of disgusting because it's your own fluids.
Did you measure any positive benefits? I mean, you said butter makes it like smoother.
Butter makes your skin, well, because it's the fat. So butter's very good for your skin.
What do you shave with?
I use an electric shaver because I don't like the getting ingrown hairs. I get that a lot if I use like the cutthroat shaver or whatever. But yeah, I just use electric razor.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Huh.
So much random crap.
So if you're sitting at home watching this podcast, maybe try rubbing some weird stuff on your face.
Yeah, for sure. Put some raw butter. I put kefir on my face, like raw kefir. Raw milk is very good.
What was that last one?
Kefir, like kefir, you say it in American. Like fermented raw milk. I put raw milk on my face. I put raw bone marrow on my face that has a lot of stem cells. I just experiment with this stuff, you know. It feels kind of nice as well. Yeah.
Spa day.
Why not, you know?
Well, thank you, everyone.
Freaky.
Oscar, where can people find you?
Instagram and then YouTube. Just type in Oscarvore and I'm there.
Oscarvore for us Americans out there. Well, thank you, Oscar, for coming on the Jack Neel Podcast. Appreciate you having you on. You were one of the most interesting guests we've had. Yeah, appreciate it.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
See you guys.